Chapter 1239. So there's still no news at the moment? In the luxurious palace where Wang Shengxiao lived on Mount Dibing, he looked at Xianming and asked softly, holding his sleeping son in one hand. No. I contacted the military counselor of Emperor Dong's palace a few months ago, and kept in touch recently. They also have no news of the little princess. Xianming, who was in charge of all the intelligence work of the Wang family of Beihai on Mount Dibing, shook his head and looked a little pale. There was some tiredness in Wang Shengxiao's eyes. After a moment of silence, he asked softly, "What did Li Tianlan say?" Xianming was stunned and said in a low voice, "He said nothing. However, the recent actions of Emperor Dong's palace are obvious." "Keep looking." Wang Shengxiao took a deep breath and said, "Find out where she is and who else besides us in Emperor Dong's palace." His eyes were extremely cold. Who on earth is looking for her? It had been nearly 3 years since Wang Yuetong left Mount Dibing. Since Li Tianlan swept across Beihai from Autumn Water to Mount Dibing in Xingzhou, Wang Yuetong disappeared from everyone's sight. For nearly 3 years, both the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace had never given up looking for her. Northeast, Yuzhou, Beihai, Yanzhou, Dongshan, Huating, Jiangzhe, and even Tiannan. The people in charge of the intelligence of the two superpowers kept sorting out all kinds of details, but they never found any effective clues. But Wang Shengxiao and Li Tianlan did not forget her. The most important thing was that the enemies of the two superpowers also did not forget Wang Yuetong. Chen Fangqing's original plan termination was mainly aimed at Wang Yuetong, and the fierce reaction of the Wang family of Beihai caused the most serious conflict in decades between Mount Dibing and Zhongzhou State. Although the situation was under control, the rift between the two sides was getting deeper and deeper. With the rise of the Aurora Legion in Snow Country, the Beihai Corps began to recruit soldiers from Beihai Province under Wang Shengxiao's order. Today, although the Beihai Corps had lost some of its core elite combat forces, its overall size had changed from 200,000 to a super corps with a total size close to the Border Control Corps, and nearly 500,000 soldiers. After the plan termination was exposed, Li Tianlan's reaction was also fierce and vicious. The death of Chen Fangqing's daughter and granddaughter was a beginning. Chen Fangqing and Chen Xi's deaths were not the end either. It hadn't been long since Chen Fangqing's death, but the Chen family had been losing members during this period of time. The former young mistress of the Chen family, Murong Xiu, was not punished after her affair with Yuan Lin was exposed. The next day, she was taken to Tiannan. Now it was said that she was the treasurer of the Xianyuan City branch of Sky City, a top-notch club under the Emperor Dong's palace. Countless people in Xianyuan City expressed a strong interest in this young lady of the Chen family. Although no one could get her yet, they were just waiting for the right price. It could be imagined what would happen to Murong Xiu in the future. The disgraced Yuan Lin committed suicide on the second day after the trial. Whether it was true or not, at least that was the conclusion. It was said that Chen Fangqing's grandson, who had just entered university, owed a huge gambling debt overseas, and was retaliated against by the underworld forces overseas. He was shot 16 times and forced to die. Nearly 20 of Chen Fangqing's relatives had met with accidents one after another in this short period of time. Car accidents, murders, suicides, and all kinds of other things were happening one after another. Today, the entire Chen clan had completely withered away, and the few remaining core members probably wouldn't be able to live for long. Li Tianlan's arrogant and almost unscrupulous revenge completely revealed a posture of madness. His attitude was very obvious. That was, he wanted to completely destroy the Chen family. The prince group had also made a symbolic intervention. However, after a certain general who couldn't stand the Chen family's plight expressed his opinion, and disappeared with his family that night, the entire prince group no longer paid any attention to the Chen family, which was no longer of any use. The cause of all this could be said to be the plan of termination proposed by Chen Fangqing. It was a good name, because although this plan did not end Wang Yuetong, it succeeded in ending his family. But with such bloody means before, until today, there were still people who wanted to get Wang Yuetong. 3 days ago, the intelligence agency of the Wang family of Beihai received accurate information that in addition to their own people looking for Wang Yuetong, there were other people looking for her. This was not surprising, and it would not be exposed in a short time. After all, Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai had always had clues. But the key was that in order not to cause any misunderstanding, Xian Ming and military counselor had been in touch with each other not frequently, but not estranged from looking for Wang Yuetong. After confirming that those people did not belong to Emperor Dong's palace, Xian Ming and military counselor were completely nervous. Wang Yuetong was undoubtedly one of the untouchable reverse scales of the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace. Although she seemed to have nothing to do with them, the two superpowers cared about her, which could be seen from their tireless search for her in the past 3 years. The consequences of this exposure were absolutely disastrous. But if they could control Wang Yuetong in advance, it was foreseeable that the gain would also be incomparably huge. A crisis was an absolute danger, and a great opportunity, in Zhongzhou State. At this time, too many people wanted to know Wang Yuetong's whereabouts. At the very least, if they found Wang Yuetong, even if they did not dare to hurt her, they could tell the two superpowers about her information in exchange for endless benefits. Fishing in troubled waters. Wang Yuetong was undoubtedly one of the big fish now. Who is looking for Yuetong? Have you found out? Wang Xingxiao asked faintly. No. Xian Ming was a little helpless. The other party looked very alert, and did not leave any clues. There are really people who don't know what's good for them. Wang Shengxiao sneered. Continue to investigate. Don't miss any clues. I want to see who is so bold. If we want to find Yuetong, we can't miss the clues of that group of people. Xian Ming nodded and did not speak. Is it possible that it is the academics? Wang Shengxiao suddenly asked. It's not very likely. Xian Ming thought for a while and shook his head. Your Highness, I don't know if you have noticed that although the academics and Emperor Dong's palace are still in a deadlock recently, their relationship seems to be easing. At this time, if the academics look for the little princess, they will lose more than they gain. Even if they have other purposes for us, they won't provoke Li Tianlan. That makes sense. Wang Shengxiao nodded. But we still need to pay attention to what we should. We can't be careless. Xian Ming grunted. That silly girl is too stubborn. I don't know how much she has suffered outside these years. She has been spoiled since she was a child. Now. He did not continue, but there was unconcealable worry in his eyes. If Xian Ming wanted to say something but stopped, then he was shocked and suddenly shut up. No one knew how powerful the intelligence network of the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace was. They had not found anyone for nearly 3 years. Xian Ming's bad feeling was getting stronger and stronger. Wang Yuetong was not in the thunder-shocking realm when she left Beihai. In this realm, she was an expert in the outside world, but she was definitely not an unsolvable expert. If there was really an accident, Xian Ming shook his head suddenly. Wang Shengxiao glanced at him coldly and said in a cold voice, What do you want to say? Nothing. Xian Ming smiled bitterly. Get out. Wang Shengxiao's voice was cold. Continue to investigate. No matter how much it costs, you must find her. Chapter 1240. I'll go to Huading or Tiannan in the near future to contact military counselor in person and strengthen our cooperation. Xian Ming said slowly. Did the little princess take any money when she left Beihai? No. Wang Shengxiao shook his head. The last time she withdrew money was on the 3rd day after she left Beihai. She was in Yuzhou and withdrew 30,000 yuan. My mother gave her a bank card, and she never touched it again. In the past few years, we have searched almost all the major cities we should look for, but we have no clues. If we continue to look for her, we can only continue to look for her in all the cities and even counties in the country. In short, I'll do my best. Xian Ming smiled bitterly and shook his head subconsciously. Zhongzhou State was a vast land with abundant resources. If a person with extraordinary strength was determined to hide, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. After all, Wang Yuetong was different from a wanted criminal. No matter how difficult it was to deal with a wanted criminal, he would leave some clues and traces. But Wang Yuetong did not conform to the law of hiding. If she changed her identity, it would be difficult to find her in a lifetime. Li Tianlan has talked to Zhou Yunhai about this matter. The police department is also working hard. It is said that the cabinet has a plan to promote a new census. The police department has issued the document. I hope there will be clues as soon as possible, Xianming said softly. Wang Shengxiao was silent. The police department issued a notice to look for Wang Yuetong. It could be said that the whole country was looking for Wang Yuetong. Li Tianlan and Zhou Yunhai were getting closer and closer, and the new group was getting more and more mature. Wang Shengxiao could clearly feel the power in his words and deeds. If there are no clues, we can change our direction, he said calmly. Find out who is inquiring about Yuetong. If we want to protect her, we don't have to find her. It's the same to control those who dare to have ideas about her. Xianming was stunned and nodded. Although it was not easy, it was much easier than looking for a person with no clues. He thought for a while and suddenly said softly, Your Highness, if you really find the little princess, do you want her to go back to Mount Dibing? Or do you want her to go back to the Wang family of Beihai? Wang Shengxiao was stunned and did not speak for a while. Xianming looked at him and said nothing. It might be too early to talk about this topic, but it was definitely a problem that could not be avoided. Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace attached great importance to Wang Yuetong. They had been looking for her since she disappeared and never gave up. The Wang family of Beihai also never gave up. Now that she had not been found, the two sides could cooperate on this issue and even exchange information. But once Wang Yuetong was found, everything would be different. There was no doubt that Wang Yuetong had become a key figure between the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace. Once her whereabouts were confirmed, her existence could cause the two great powers to become more harmonious. At the same time, it was possible for the two great powers to erupt into even more intense conflicts. Xianming could imagine Wang Yuetong's dilemma. If it wasn't so difficult, she wouldn't have been hiding all this time. Wang Shengxiao was silent for a long time before he said softly, I respect her choice. No matter what, it's good that you're safe. Xianming nodded. Now Wang Shengxiao had the strength to let Wang Yuetong choose freely. Maybe he was still not Li Tianlan's match, but it was not easy for Li Tianlan to kill him. If they were on Mount Dibing, his personal combat capability was only a little weaker than Li Tianlan's. He was capable of protecting both Wang Yuetong and the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Shengxiao shook his head and got rid of all the messy thoughts in his mind. He said softly, Go do your work. Xianming turned and left. Wang Shengxiao sat quietly in his seat. After a while he lowered his head and looked at his sleeping son in his arms. His little body was curled up, and he was sucking a finger with his little mouth. Wang Shengxiao smiled and reached out to touch his face gently. His eyes were unprecedentedly soft. Light footsteps could be heard coming from upstairs. Song Xiai, in pajamas, slowly went downstairs and said softly, Is Xianming gone? Is there any news of Yuetong? Wang Shengxiao shook his head, sighed and murmured, Who knows where that girl is? Song Xiai took her son from Wang Shengxiao's arms and said softly, Don't worry. When Yuetong left, she was already at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. In the past few years, even if she didn't meditate, she could smoothly enter the thunder-shocking realm. Even if she encountered an accident, she could completely match an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in a short time. How many experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm are there in the entire Zhongzhou state? And they must know her. Until now, there has been no news, which can only mean that Yuetong is not in any danger. She is very safe now. I'm not worried about her safety, but it's unreasonable for her to be floating outside all the time. Wang Shengxiao said helplessly, Even if she really went to Emperor Dong's palace now, I'll accept it. Maybe she still can't figure it out. Song Xiai said softly, But she will figure it out eventually. When she figures it out, she will be mature. Wang Shengxiao nodded silently. Let's go to rest. Song Xiai smiled and stretched out her small hand to pull Wang Shengxiao's sleeve. Her voice was hoarse, with a touch of faint charm. He said he would accompany me tonight. A faint sound-a voice suddenly sounded from the upstairs corridor. Song Xiai and Wang Shengxiao looked up at the same time. In the corridor on the second floor, Tang Shi, who now controlled the huge economy of the Wang family of Beihai, and was Wang Shengxiao's fiancé in terms of identity, stood there quietly, looking down at them. There was no expression on her beautiful face. Wang Shengxiao coughed dryly. Sleep. Tang Shi looked at Wang Shengxiao and asked in a lukewarm voice. Wang Shengxiao was a little confused. The relationship between Tang Shi and Song Xiai had never been harmonious. Her mother had mentioned that during the 2 years they had left Mount Dibing, the relationship between the two was not bad. Song Xiai was pregnant for 10 months. Tang Shi took good care of her, and was very fond of their son Hao Yin. As Wang Shengxiao's strength soared, they returned to Mount Dibing. The relationship between the two seemed to be back to before they left Mount Dibing. Or even better. Song Xiai had already carried on the Wang family of Beihai. When Tang Shi was alone with Wang Shengxiao, she clearly said that she also wanted a child. In terms of time, today was the right day. After Song Xiai gave birth to a child, her needs seemed to be much greater than before. She was unwilling to let him go easily, saying that no one took care of the child in the middle of the night. However, the three of them lived together now. When the two women faced each other, it was really a battle of swords all the time. Choose one yourself. Song Xiai held her son and looked at Wang Shengxiao with a smile, dignified and charming. Ahem, Wang Shengxiao coughed dryly. Well that. Before he could finish his words, his phone rang as if it was a life-saving call. Wang Shengxiao's face suddenly changed. He took out his cell phone and said with a smile, I'll answer the call first. Senior Xia's words flashed on the screen. Wang Shengxiao narrowed his eyes and immediately answered the call, whispering, Senior Xia. Yes. Xia Kuan chuckled at the other end of the phone and said directly, Xiaoyao just left my place. Now you can act. Wang Shengxiao took a deep breath, nodded and said calmly, I see. Senior Xia. Thank you for your hard work. Xia Kuan hung up the phone with a smile. Wang Shengxiao put down his cell phone and looked at the two beautiful women who were looking at each other and trying to kill each other with their eyes. He said with a smile, You two can sleep tonight. Sure, move in. When Hao Yin wakes up tonight, you can help take care of him. Where are you going? Tang Shi and Song Xiai turned their heads at the same time and looked at Wang Shengxiao. Wang Shengxiao played with his cell phone and said calmly, To Beihai Prison. Chapter 1241. The invisible submarine gradually sank on the surface of the sea. The roaring and undulating waves gradually became quiet. The light was getting weaker, and the surroundings began to become dark and quiet. Under the tremendous pressure, the water in the ocean was like a solid painting that had solidified. The submarine's light pierced the darkness of the deep sea and kept moving forward according to the instructions of the radar. In the small room of the well-lit submarine, Wang Shengxiao silently looked at the flashing signal on the screen in front of him, looking extremely patient and calm. Beihai Prison was one of the most expensive projects of the Wang family of Beihai in hundreds of years, and it naturally became the most secret prison in the world. Its protective measures were much more exaggerated than those of the desert prison in Zhongzhou State. This prison built in the deep sea was not big, and its original intention was not to be a large prison. Its small scale could be said to be exquisite, and it could probably only hold less than 200 prisoners inside. But to be able to build a stable prison in the deep sea, in addition to the huge funds behind it, it also proved that the Wang family of Beihai had almost the top technical level in this regard. Large-scale deep-sea operations of more than 600 meters underwater. Not to mention when Beihai Prison was established, even today, few countries in the world could do it. The prison was far away from Beihai. It was a disc-shaped building. This small-scale prison was insanely equipped with nearly 400 sets of automatic weapon systems, which could be said to be armed to the teeth. Under such circumstances, not to mention the low possibility of a fugitive or the survival problem of the other party under the great pressure of the deep sea. Even if someone could really do these two things, with more than 400 sets of weapon systems, Beihai only needed to press a button to completely destroy all life within 10 nautical miles around the prison in just a few seconds. This prison had been completed for more than 200 years. It was originally proposed by the chosen one of Beihai's ancestors. After generations of continuous hard work and debugging, it took hundreds of years to build Beihai Prison. Today it was in a state of huge loss. The word loss had nothing to do with the prison, but extremely special prisons like Beihai Prison and the desert prison all took on a different mission. This prison was special. This also meant that the prisoners who were qualified to be imprisoned here were also special. And for the big forces like Zhongzhou State or the Wang family of Beihai, such specialness also meant extraordinary benefits. Ordinary prisoners were not qualified to be imprisoned here at all. For the prisoners who were qualified to be locked up here, perhaps a casual word from them could be invaluable information, which could make the Wang family of Beihai gain a lot. North Sea Prison had been built for more than 200 years, and it had locked up a total of 70 prisoners. They were famous traders who were branded in the history books, top-secret agents who controlled huge resources, the founder and inventor of a certain cutting-edge technology, the master of a superforce in the dark world, the elusive killer, the infamous Kongbu. In addition, 2 patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai had successfully broken through to the peak of the invincible realm. There were also 2 patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai, who broke the limit of the thunder-shocking realm, and stepped into the domain of the invincible realm. The existence of the North Sea Prison was a legend to North Sea, and it had extraordinary significance. No one could deny the great contribution this place had made to the North Sea. But the truth was undeniable. Since the establishment of North Sea Prison, it had always been in a state of loss. For more than 200 years, Beihai had trained invincible realm experts here, and obtained unimaginable benefits from every prisoner here. Their status had gradually improved, and their power had been expanding. But all these gains were still not comparable to the terrifying cost of establishing Beihai Prison, and the annual maintenance cost invested in Beihai Prison to this day. How much did it cost to build North Sea Prison? From the time when the chosen one of Beihai's ancestors put forward the idea, to the time when the second patriarch took over the power of the Wang family of Beihai, North Sea Prison had burned nearly 80 billion. It was star dollars. At that time, the Zhongzhou dollar had not appreciated according to the economic trend. At that time, 80 billion star dollars was equivalent to more than 400 billion Zhongzhou dollars. And what did they get by burning this money? It was not North Sea Prison, not even the prototype of North Sea Prison. The more than 400 billion was a lot of experimental data, as well as a prison model that existed in theory and drawings. The burning of money had started at that time. Then 100 years, 200 years, 250 years. It was burning money every year. The Zhongzhou dollar was appreciating. Now 1 Zhongzhou dollar was equivalent to 3 star dollars. During the hundreds of years of the entire North Sea Prison, from concept to construction to completion to maintenance, the Wang family of Beihai had burned nearly 3 trillion Zhongzhou dollars. 3 trillion. And it was just the data published on the surface. As the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, Wang Shengxiao knew that this data was greatly exaggerated. In fact, the cost was more than twice the published data. This was equivalent to the wealth created by the Wang family of Beihai for decades at its peak. Until now, the Wang family of Beihai had to invest tens of billions of Zhongzhou dollars every year in order to maintain North Sea Prison, update equipment, and set up weapons. This was just daily maintenance. This was one of the most expensive projects of the Wang family of Beihai since its establishment. There were only 2 projects that could compare with the cost of North Sea Prison in the entire North Sea. The first was the North Sea Refuge, and the second was the numerous laboratory projects in North Sea. The entire dark world had different comments on North Sea Prison. But one thing was undeniable. If the Wang family of Beihai had not built North Sea Prison, or if the construction requirements had been lower and the unimaginable wealth had been used on its own expansion, the Wang family of Beihai today would definitely be stronger than it was now. Many people thought that North Sea Prison was a joke. It was even a product of the Wang family of Beihai showing off its strength and wealth. Even many people of the Wang family of Beihai thought so. Except for the patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai. Today's Wang family of Beihai, perhaps even Summer Solstice, did not understand what North Sea Prison meant. As the patriarch, Wang Shengxiao knew very well that this was a trump card, and also the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai. Beihai used the wealth that could make it stronger to create North Sea Prison. It did give up some things, but one day it would get more. Just like the day he met Lin Shi. They went from Tiannan to West Africa, and from Africa to Beihai. When they came to North Sea Prison, Those people gave the same comments. On that day, Lin Shi stood in the submarine and looked at the outline of North Sea prison. After a long silence he said, "What is this?" And the apostle who followed him said with a smile, "This is a very interesting thing. To be exact, if the current technology does not develop explosively, this is a trump card that can ensure that the Wang family of Beihai will stand at the peak for 1,000 years. This was the apostle's comment. Chapter 1242. The submarine continued to move forward. On the screen, the small green dot representing the submarine was infinitely close to the small red dot of the destination. The surroundings suddenly became extremely quiet. The slightly dull sound of water flow completely disappeared at a certain moment, and so did the sound of the submarine running. The two lampposts that had been illuminating the dark deep sea became scattered at the same time as all the sound disappeared. The dazzling light scattered into dense spots of light. The submarine shook violently in silence. The engine instantly lost control and began to fall. Inside the submarine, Wang Shengxiao, who was standing quietly in front of the screen, flicked his fingers. A stream of sword energy passed through the submarine and merged with the outside world. The submarine's falling momentum stopped, and then the whole submarine seemed to be pulled by an external force and began to accelerate. Wang Xingxiao's aura continued to rise. In the blink of an eye, the whole submarine was filled with sword intent. He stood quietly, spreading his sword intent to feel the environment outside the submarine. This was the deep sea hundreds of meters below, but there was no seawater at all within 10,000 meters of the submarine. The huge outline of North Sea prison was constantly becoming clearer under the perception of Wang Shengxiao's sword intent. With North Sea prison as the center, every 3 to 5 seconds, there would be an incredible stream of sword energy spreading out from North Sea prison. The mighty sword qi swept about, tearing apart the space within 10,000 meters around the prison, tearing apart every drop of seawater. The unimaginable sword qi kept whistling, opening up a vacuum of 10,000 meters in the deep sea, which was hundreds of meters deep. The sword energy rose in North Sea prison and swept to the edge of the vacuum and seawater. The deep sea was constantly turbulent with the sword energy, forming a huge whirlpool of 10,000 meters in the deep sea. The whirlpool rushed straight to the surface of the sea with a terrifying undercurrent, and the entire nearby sea was surging. Wang Shengxiao's submarine had already left the sea at this time, and was pulled closer by the sword energy of North Sea prison in the vacuum state. The sword energy was whistling and turbulent silently. Within the scope of the sword energy, all sounds were completely suppressed. Even light was torn apart by the ubiquitous, but invisible sword energy and scattered everywhere. Wang Shengxiao could sense the surging and roaring of the endless seawater at the edge of the sword energy. It was the power of the endless ocean, which turned into a whirlpool and an undercurrent, spreading from the deep sea to the surface. It was like the breathing of the sea, but to be more precise, it was the breathing of the Sword Emperor. Chaos in Snow Country. Since the end, Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong's whereabouts had been unknown. There had been countless speculations about what had happened to Wang Tianzong in the Dark World. Some people said that he had been seriously injured by the Eternal Sword, and his martial arts foundation had been completely destroyed. Instead of returning to Beihai, he had been left to fend for himself in a corner. Some people said that Wang Tianzong was seriously injured and dying, and he was hiding in Beihai to recover. Some people also said that Wang Tianzong had died, but the Wang family of Beihai kept it a secret. There were many speculations, but no one knew where Wang Tianzong was. Only a few core people on Mount Dibing knew. Wang Tianzong had been secretly recuperating in Beihai prison. This was the safest place in the Wang family of Beihai. In other words, it was a place that could guarantee that Wang Tianzong would not be affected by any external force. Before he officially woke up, this place was the strongest barrier of the Wang family of Beihai. Everything in front of him could prove Wang Tianzong's situation at this time, and it could also prove the strength of the Chosen One. The sword light that crisscrossed the deep sea showed that Wang Tianzong had recovered his consciousness to a certain extent, but his kendo and will were always out of control, so such a horrible scene was created. The sword energy coat on Wang Shengxiao, which allowed him to fight Li Tianlan alone, was also the greatest gift of Wang Tianzong, who was in a trance, to to the Wang family of Beihai, and it was also all he could do at present. This showed that Wang Tianzong was still struggling on the edge of life and death. Even so, in a seriously injured state, Wang Tianzong, who had recovered some consciousness, was still showing his strength. His kendo and will, which were out of control, were constantly fighting against the whole sea area around him as he breathed. As the vacuum of Beihai prison grew bigger and bigger, Wang Tianzong's kendo and will would slowly recover little by little. When this vacuum suddenly disappeared one day, it was likely that Wang Tianzong's consciousness would be fully recovered, and he would be able to use his kendo and will initially. So every time he saw this scene, Wang Shengxiao always felt very at ease. The sword energy surging out of Beihai prison was so turbulent, which meant that his father's condition was getting better little by little. Today's Wang family of Beihai, because of the sword energy coat, did not lack the top combat capability. But in Wang Shengxiao's heart, he still could not be regarded as the pillar of Mount Dibing. The pillar that could support Mount Dibing, the entire Beihai province, and the pride of more than 20 million people in Beihai was still his father. Li Tianlan was invincible. Li Tianlan's kendo was perfect. Xian Yuanfeng's sharpness shocked the world. All of this was a fact that could be seen by the whole world. But Wang Shengxiao was very clear, and Wang Shengxiao believed that Li Tianlan also knew that no matter how fancy Emperor Dong's palace was now, Li Tianlan's invincible name was only because Wang Tianzong did not show up. Li Tianlan was indeed very strong now, but at present, he was not a match for the chosen one. Even if he had Xian Yuanfeng, which was full of energy, he could not. Wang Shengxiao sighed softly, and his eyes shone. Endless sword energy surged out from his body and completely merged with the sword energy of Beihai prison. The sword energy coat on his body quickly recovered to its peak state. In this vacuum, because the sword energy was of the same origin, Wang Shengxiao and everyone on the ship also regained the ability to move and breathe freely. The submarine was pulled close to Beihai prison by the sword energy. In a vacuum without seawater, the submarine and the prison gate opened at the same time. Shrouded by the familiar sword energy, Wang Shengxiao, who was completely relaxed, walked into the prison. Small and gentle electric lights hung in the bronze-colored corridor of the prison. The ordinary-looking but extraordinarily charming female saint stood at the end of the corridor to greet him. Seeing Wang Shengxiao coming over, she nodded gently and said in a flat tone, "Come to visit His Majesty?" The Wang family of Beihai provided the foundation of Lin Shi's group of 3 in West Africa. In return, Saint was responsible for making Wang Tianzong recover. This was a sincere cooperation between both sides, and no one played tricks. Hundreds of thousands of troops belonging to the Wang family of Beihai in the West African Divine Martial Corps had begun to be taken over by Lin Shi. After Saint came to the Wang family of Beihai, she also did her best to treat Wang Tianzong and made good progress. At the same time, because of her joining, the Wang family of Beihai's gene potions, which were already at the top level in the world, continued to make breakthroughs. Several kinds of gene potions under research had been semi-finished. At least so far, both sides were very satisfied with each other's existence and this cooperation. Yes. Wang Shengxiao nodded and then smiled. But the main purpose of coming here today is to pick someone up. His voice was very soft, but his eyes were full of expectation. Chapter 1243. Wang Tianzong was in the largest cell of Beihai prison. It was called a cell, but in fact, it could be said to be the most technologically advanced ward. The spacious room, which was like a hall, was full of all kinds of medical equipment. Countless data was scrolling on the screen every minute and second. The top group of the Beihai Biological Laboratory watched Wang Tianzong 24 hours a day, observing his situation, injecting drugs, recording, and constantly thinking about various treatment plans. Just like last time, Wang Shengxiao stood in front of Wang Tianzong's hibernation chamber for a moment, and finally shook his head and walked out. His Majesty's recovery has been speeding up recently. The potion you used on him before was correct. His condition is very dangerous. That potion is one of the best choices at present, and it can greatly stabilize his body. Even if it's me, what I can make won't be much better than that potion, and it will take time. Saint followed Wang Shengxiao, and her tone was still calm. But that potion seems to be incomplete. In my calculation, it should be able to play a greater role. Saint just began to formally contact a series of treatment plans for Wang Tianzong these days. She had been to Beihai prison once before. Although the two sides cooperated at the beginning, how could the Wang family of Beihai really trust her and Lin Shi, who were of unknown origin? Saint herself could detect more than a dozen tests. It was not until yesterday that the Wang family of Beihai initially let down its guard and showed her some data of Wang Tianzong's body. Then the current person in charge of the laboratory discussed with her for nearly a night. After further confirming Saint's real talent and knowledge in this aspect, and further confirming that she really had no malice, he officially allowed her to begin to integrate into the work of saving Wang Tianzong. To be exact, Saint had only been in contact with Wang Tianzong for a few hours, but she had already made several useful suggestions to the laboratory and sorted out their treatment plans immediately. You should be talking about the body of the god of war. Wang Shengxiao thought for a moment. But that's half and only half. The body of the god of war? Saint's mouth twitched, and she seemed to be a little dissatisfied. Her eyes were a little cold. What's wrong? Wang Shengxiao looked at her strangely. Saint took a deep breath and didn't say anything. She came from the god of war's realm, and the word god of war meant a lot to her. It wasn't just a simple belief. Now a piece of trash genetic potion, although it was close to the top in the real environment, still made her a little uncomfortable in the name of the god of war. Why is it only half? Saint asked expressionlessly. My mother gave the other half to someone else, Wang Shengxiao said quietly. He still didn't know who his mother had given that half of the body of the god of war to. Saint was silent for a moment, as if he was thinking about something. Finally he nodded. Where is Lin Shi? Wang Shengxiao asked suddenly. He has arrived in West Africa and has begun to sort out the interior of the Divine Martial Army. His Highness will use the Divine Martial Army as the foundation to take over the rule of the Dark World of Africa as soon as possible. Saint said faintly. It will probably take 1 or 2 years. Wang Shengxiao nodded silently. If it was someone else who said it would take a year or 2 to inform the Dark World of Continent, Wang Shengxiao wouldn't believe it. Continent was a complicated place. The Divine Martial Army was known as the #1 army of Continent, but it only had a slight advantage. Now all the superpowers in the Dark World, except for Emperor Dong's palace who hadn't had time to intervene in Continent, almost all the superpowers had spokesmen in Continent. If Lin Shi took over Tianzong and wanted to conquer Continent, there would be a lot of friction with these superpowers. This could also further strengthen the cooperative relationship between the two sides. If possible, if Beihai can lend us some masters when necessary, the time will be faster. Saint continued to speak. Lin Shi was undoubtedly a master, and the apostle beside Lin Shi was an expert among experts. If they really went all out, the apostle could be said to be the strongest among the 3 of them at present. Even Saint, who had the worst combat capability, could not be threatened by ordinary experts of the invincible realm. But now the extreme suppression of the real environment almost locked the strength of the 3 of them. If it was in the same environment a month ago, it wouldn't take them a year or 2 to conquer the Africa land. To put it simply and crudely, the apostle could completely solve any force in the Africa land in a few minutes. Even if there was a plan to cover something up, it wouldn't take more than a week. But now among the 3 of them, Lin Shi was the least affected, and Saint was in the middle. As for the apostle with the strongest combat capability, it was a complete tragedy now. Conquering the Africa land in a year or 2 was a relatively optimistic statement. Wang Shengxiao frowned, but soon he stretched his brows and chuckled. I can't leave alone. Beihai is too long. As for the others, they are also useful. Let's see how it goes. I can temporarily lend you a master, but he can only leave Zhongzhou state for a short time. He still has to come back as soon as possible. Is he the one we are going to pick up now? Saint asked. Wang Shengxiao said yes. At present, the Wang family of Beihai, not counting my father, not counting my second uncle who has left Mount Dibing, and not counting my special case, he can be said to be the first master in Beihai and the only invincible realm expert in Mount Dibing. When necessary, he can go to the Africa land to help you. He is very strong. Saint was silent for a while and said softly, "No, not very strong, but very strong. In today's dark world, in terms of pure strength, he is the only one who can approach His Majesty Li Tianlan in terms of strength." She had only known Wang Tianzong for a short time, but the time she spent in Beihai prison was not short. During this time, in addition to improving the existing gene potion technology in Beihai, she also studied the prisoners here, who were not prisoners of prisoners. Saint was naturally very interested in the person who was imprisoned next to Wang Tianzong, and could feel the core sword intent of the chosen one at a close distance every day. She had already gotten the physical data of the other party. It was no exaggeration to say that in terms of pure strength, the other party was only second to Li Tianlan in today's dark world, and even stronger than Wang Shengxiao and Lin Shi. But it was just strength. I can introduce him to you later. In the future, Lin Shi can contact him directly. Mount Dibing has complete trust in him. Wang Shengxiao walked through the corridor and came to another cell next to Wang Tianzong's. Compared with the medical equipment everywhere in Wang Tianzong's room, this place was decorated as luxuriously and comfortably as a 7-star hotel. Wang Shengxiao stood in front of the door and subconsciously narrowed his eyes. He had not knocked on the door, but he could clearly feel that the space at the door was filled with an indescribable aura. Fierce, violent, condensed, sharp, and fierce. It was like saber radiance, but also like sword energy. It was like a saber or a sword, but it was full of tsunami-like power. Wang Shengxiao chuckled and reached out to knock on the door. In the space behind the door, all the aura paused and then disappeared in an instant. Wang Shengxiao's voice was calm. "Brother Jiang, it's me." Chapter 1244. The wind in Emperor Dong's palace was cool and soft. It blew over the lawn, over the fountain, over the lake, and poured into the boat in the lake, bringing with it black hair wantonly. Wisps of rich fragrance seemed to completely melt in the quiet rain. Li Tianlan sat on the boat, holding a fishing rod in his hand. He looked at the rippling water in front of him and subconsciously rubbed his forehead. "What's wrong?" Qin Weibai leaned lazily on Li Tianlan and put a grape in his mouth. Her voice was a little soft. "It's boring." Li Tianlan shook his head. "I find that I don't like fishing very much. It's a little boring." "Then what do you want to do?" Qin Weibai ate the fruit and said with a smile, "I'll go with you." Li Tianlan thought about it and said seriously, "I don't know." He suddenly felt very confused. He had no direction and no motivation. He didn't want to do anything, but it was boring if he didn't do anything. In the shortest time he reviewed his life of more than 20 years. He began to temper his body when he was young. He was exposed to martial arts when he was a teenager and desperately wanted to make himself stronger. His coming-of-age ceremony was when he was taken to the desert prison by Thunder God. He lost to Fireman when he was at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. After he rushed into the thunder-shocking realm, he lost to Fireman again. So he abolished his martial arts and began to practice again. That year in the desert prison could be said to be the turning point of his life. Under the great setback, he made his martial arts foundation absolutely perfect. The desperate maze hidden in the darkness under the prison made up for his state of mind, and made his will perfect. He entered the Sky Academy at the age of 19. It should have been a slow school life. At that time, in Li Honghe's mind, maybe he wanted him to really adapt to life in Zhongzhou state after leaving the border. He wanted him to completely enter the secular world, grow up slowly, form his own team, and accumulate his own prestige among the younger generation. Li Honghe would also take advantage of this time to pave the way for him with the Dongqing clan. After graduation, he would marry Dongqing Rushi, enter the Border Control Corps, climb up from the bottom, and completely integrate into the system of Zhongzhou state. 20 years later, Li Tianlan was nearly 40 years old. With the heritage of the Li family and Li Tianlan's talent, it was enough for him to enter the peak of the invincible realm and rank at the top of the divine list. At that time, Li Tianlan could replace Dongqing Wudi as the Marshal of Zhongzhou state, enter the parliament, and control the Border Control Corps. It was only during that period that Li Tianlan, who had the full support of the giant group, was qualified to confront Gu Xingyun, Kunlun City, and even the Wang family of Beihai. With the help of the giant group to overwhelm Kunlun City, the giant group completed the reshuffle of its own group with the help of the interests it obtained. It strengthened its cohesion to the greatest extent and allowed the Dongqing clan, the Bai family, and the Zhou family to complete the consolidation and integration. After the transformation, the three wealthy families pushed him to the position of the state-protecting war god, and ended the cause and effect between him and the Wang family of Beihai. If there were no accidents, this was his life trajectory, and it was also the safest life path for him in the eyes of the Li family and the Dongqing clan. However, Qin Weibai's appearance completely shattered this trajectory. Even though the Li family had been down and out for many years, it was not to the extent of being forgotten. The heir of the Li family was in the teeth of the storm, and Qin Weibai was the focus of other people's attention. From the moment the two of them met, his life had become extremely abrupt. The Samsara Palace, the final battle of East Island, and the external forces swept over. Li Tianlan was swept to East Island before he could adapt to the real life in the secular world. Then it was a journey from Huading to the polar ground for 3 years, far away from the situation of Zhongzhou State. His life in the academy was about to end before it started. The maneuver of the two academies and the chaos in Snow Country broke out at the same time. Li Tianlan really ushered in his own era. And the beginning of this era was his revisiting his old place, and his 2 years in the desert prison. Until now he was invincible in the world. But looking back along the way, Li Tianlan found that he had almost never really integrated into the prosperity of Zhongzhou State. His goal had always been clear. The pressure and motivation had always surrounded him. He was busy thinking, struggling, and fighting. He knew what he was doing and what he should do. But now he lost his direction. Perhaps it was because he had never truly relaxed before, so when he truly relaxed, the first thing he felt was a sense of helplessness. It was an extreme discomfort and a great sense of loss. The situation in Zhongzhou State seemed to be still chaotic and intense, but in fact the academy and the new group had strangely calmed down. The Ministry of Supervision of Zhongzhou State officially intervened in the Liaodong wandering meditation case. But after the Ministry of Supervision arrived in Liaodong, Bai Qingqian made some similar stable and harmonious voices in several official speeches. After all, Bai Qingqian was the speaker of Liaodong. The Ministry of Supervision had to pay attention to her opinions. Therefore, Liaodong was now in a strange stalemate. As for the Flourishing Age Fund, the joint investigation of various departments also came to a standstill. The Wang family of Beihai stepped forward to take over some of the mess left by the Flourishing Age Fund after the joint investigation. After sorting it out, it would naturally become a small gold mine. They were still waiting to continue to eat more profits from the Flourishing Age Fund. But as the investigation came to a standstill, their expectations seemed to be far away. The major groups were still holding back and keeping a wait-and-see attitude. Jiang Shangyu and Gu Xingyan were completely silent. Li Huaqing didn't meet Li Tianlan, and he seemed to have put down his attention on Li Guangtu. In short, the whole Zhongzhou State strangely calmed down under the seemingly intense situation. And these things, with the rise of his status, no longer needed him to worry about them personally. The existence of military counselor did play a great role. It could be said that he was Li Tianlan's real right-hand man. After Li Tianlan set the strategic goal, the rest was operated by military counselor. There was no need for Li Tianlan to worry at all. In the first situation, Li Tianlan was very clear about what he had to do. What he needed was patience. Waiting. No matter what he wanted to do, all of this had to be after the election. And there was still more than half a year before the election. During this period of time when he could only wait and do nothing, it was the time for Li Tianlan to relax and enjoy life leisurely. But he didn't know how to enjoy life at all, nor could he adapt to the leisure of doing nothing at the moment. He really didn't know what to do. Li Tianlan casually put down the fishing rod in his hand and sighed. It's boring. I can't get interested in anything. It's a little boring. With his strength at this level, the progress of martial arts had been extremely slow. Meditation didn't work at all. Now he was completely pursuing the most comfortable state of martial arts. When he was completely relaxed, with himself as the center, everything within tens of thousands of meters was under his absolute control. Not only every grass and tree, but even every wisp of airflow. He knew it like the palm of his hand. His sword energy casually enveloped the entire Emperor Dong's palace, and adjusted the temperature in the Emperor Dong's palace according to his will. Within the scope of his sword energy, he could turn midsummer into cold winter into early spring, cool breeze in the stuffy Emperor Dong's palace, and he could also make drizzle in the Emperor Dong's palace under the scorching sun. To put it bluntly, this sounded incredible, but in fact, it was the sublimation of the four realms of martial arts. It was a further and deeper application of the four realms of martial arts. Now he was fishing here, but in fact he knew every fish in the artificial lake like the palm of his hand. He even knew how many bubbles they spat. As long as he wanted, he could catch all the fish in the artificial lake with his eyes closed. What was the point of sitting here? Qin Weibai glanced at him and said bitterly, "You think I'm annoying, don't you? You think it's boring to stay with me?" No. Li Tianlan shook his head subconsciously. "I just think fishing is boring. Why don't we go back?" "Go back for what? Do you want to bully me again?" Qin Weibai tilted her head and looked at him. Her eyes became more and more aggrieved. "It's boring to be with me. That's not what you said when you played with me last night. Do you only find it interesting in bed? When you're tired of playing with me, are you going to kick me out? What nonsense are you talking about?" Li Tianlan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He subconsciously reached out and pinched Qin Weibai's pink earlobe. "I just feel that I'm not used to it now. It's a waste of time. Maybe it's because I haven't really experienced these things before. I don't really understand the so-called freedom when I'm so idle. You basically ignored me these days when we were together. Except for working hard in bed, you didn't coax me." Qin Weibai shook her head and let Li Tianlan pinch her earlobe and complain. "Yeah, I'm in a daze all day. If I stay like this, I feel like a fool." Li Tianlan sighed softly and suddenly said, "What on earth did Li Huaqing say to you that day?" On the day Qin Weibai came back, she talked with Li Huaqing for nearly 3 hours. No one knew what they talked about. Even Han Xinyan, who went with Qin Weibai, couldn't hear the content of their conversation because Ma Si asked her to drink tea. But Li Tianlan could clearly feel that since that conversation, the battle between the academy and the Flourishing Age Fund seemed to have eased. Although it still seemed to be at loggerheads, in fact, both sides had maintained a restrained attitude. "I just tested his trump card." Qin Weibai leaned against Li Tianlan lazily and said softly, "If I'm not wrong, he should take the initiative to talk to you in the near future. After the talk, the relationship between us will become clear, and the next election should be smoother." Li Tianlan moved his hand around the slender waist in his arms. He said in a hoarse voice, "I asked, what on earth did you talk to him about?" Qin Weibai's body trembled slightly. She blushed and twisted her body. She whispered, "He's still outside. How dare you resist?" Li Tianlan moved again and said with a smile, "There's no one around. What are you afraid of? If you don't tell the truth, believe it or not, I will punish you on this ship. Tell me, what on earth did you talk about?" "I won't say." Qin Weibai pressed her lips tightly and hummed weakly, "I do know Li Huaqing's trump card. But so far, he hasn't made up his mind. There are still variables. It's not a good time to say it now. It's better to wait for a while and let him talk to you himself. It's too boring to wait." Li Tianlan chuckled and unscrupulously felt the touch of softness on his fingertips. Qin Weibai lowered her head and gently bit Li Tianlan's arm. She said with a cry, "I didn't bring other clothes." Li Tianlan was indifferent. "How about this? I still have a card in my hand. This card can make Li Huaqing make up his mind quickly. In a few days at most, I promise he will take the initiative to come to you, okay?" Li Tianlan smiled with satisfaction, took out a piece of paper and wiped his fingers. The delicate fragrance on the ship seemed to be stronger. Li Tianlan held the woman next to him in his arms again. "Open your mouth." Qin Weibai twisted her body, wanting to resist but also welcome. "Orange," Li Tianlan said. Qin Weibai, who felt weak all over and blushed, reached out her trembling hand to pick up an orange and peeled it clumsily. Her eyes were blurred and in a trance, and her body trembled slightly unconsciously. A piece of orange with its tangerine veins was sent into his mouth. Li Tianlan ate the orange and gently bit Qin Weibai's soft fingers. He said vaguely, "How to deal with Li Kuangtu? Do you have any suggestions?" The numbness on her fingers made Qin Weibai tremble again. Leaning against him, she was like a devil and couldn't resist at all. It was like the forest on the night when she came from Tiannan to Emperor Dong's palace. It was like Li Tianlan's dishonest claws just now. It seemed that she didn't know when she had been so obedient to him, let him bully her, and was completely controlled. Qin Weibai, who was scolding herself in her heart, bit her red lips, forced herself to cheer up, and murmured, "I don't know. You decide." She took her fingers back, picked off the tangerine veins on the orange, shook her head hard and whispered, "When Li Huaqin came to you, you knew what to do. It is true that he has cards up his sleeve, but my suggestion is you can't believe everything he says, but you can't ignore it." Li Tianlan nodded thoughtfully. Qin Weibai leaned closer to Li Tianlan and said in a soft voice, "It's so boring." Li Tianlan opened his mouth and was about to say something, but he suddenly smelled a hint. He chuckled and grabbed the fishing rod again. "I think it's okay. Fishing and cultivating one's mind are good." Qin Weibai gently gritted her teeth and looked at Li Tianlan. She became more and more resentful, and her body leaned closer to him. Li Tianlan was unmoved. "Bad guy, are you fishing or keeping me in suspense?" Qin Weibai gently pinched him. Her light voice seemed to be coquettish and pleading, very implicit and very seductive. "Go back. Beg me." Li Tianlan chuckled. "You're going to humiliate me again, aren't you? You're always like this. You were like this the first time. You even hit me and scolded me. You're a bad guy, you. You agreed yourself." Li Tianlan smiled and said, "And I didn't scold you. You admitted it yourself. I was trying to please you." Qin Weibai said bitterly, "I'm not coquettish at all. And the first time I didn't agree and I didn't." She suddenly frowned. Her eyes were in a trance, and her face became a little pale. Li Tianlan was also stunned. He looked at Qin Weibai and gradually frowned. Qin Weibai, who would bravely look into his eyes in the past, avoided his gaze and turned to look into the distance. Her eyes were a little unfocused. Some small fun between husband and wife suddenly became silent. An incomparably deep light flashed in Li Tianlan's eyes. Qin Weibai's face became paler and paler, without any blood. Silence continued on the boat. The surrounding rain seemed to be a little messy. "Tianlan." After nearly 10 minutes, Qin Weibai said softly, "I want to go back." Li Tianlan held the fishing rod and did not speak for a long time. Chapter 1245. There were very few so-called small clinics in Emperor Dong's palace, which was like a large construction site. At present, except for a large general hospital in the city center, there were some regular private hospitals similar to sanatoriums, which belonged to Emperor Dong's palace. Ning Qianqing had implemented the free medical care plan in Xianyuan City more than a year ago. As long as the official residents of Xianyuan City were treated in the regular hospitals in Xianyuan City, no matter if they had a fever, a cold, or a serious illness. In this way, the so-called private clinics had almost disappeared. Because of this, when Tianlan Clinic, a small clinic with a coquettish and even bold name, officially opened inside Emperor Dong's palace, it almost caused a sensation in the whole palace. Many people even thought that Emperor Dong had been bored recently, so he opened a clinic in his home and became a doctor. No one thought that this small clinic was a provocation. If the clinic was opened outside Emperor Dong's palace and was named after Emperor Dong, the sign of the clinic would probably be smashed as soon as it was put up. However, when such a small clinic appeared inside Emperor Dong's palace with the sign of Emperor Dong's palace, everyone knew that it must be done by their own people, or at least with the acquiescence of Emperor Dong, or even by Emperor Dong himself out of boredom. Tianlan Clinic was not small. The main building was a detached villa with 4 floors above and below the ground, located in the garden area of the central area of Emperor Dong's palace. The scenery was elegant. The basement floor stored medicinal materials and medical equipment. The first floor was the outpatient hall and pharmacy. Infusions and injections could be done here. The second floor was the ward. A dozen or so wards were arranged in a standard way, and the largest bedroom was even hung with the sign of Donghuang's special VIP room. The third floor was the laboratory, bedroom, and study of the clinic owner. The clinic had been open for less than a week, but there was an endless stream of patients every day. Many people were not sick, but they came to pretend to be sick with the idea of getting close to Emperor Donghuang. Then they were disappointed to find that the boss of the clinic was not Emperor Donghuang, nor was he a senior of Emperor Donghuang's palace who had a close relationship with Emperor Donghuang as they had expected. Instead, it was a young fat man who looked unfamiliar, who smiled every day and looked easy to talk to. As a result, the clinic's business quickly became cold. Xianyuan Wushang didn't take it seriously and just stayed in the clinic. Strictly speaking, he just stayed in the clinic. In the less than a week since the clinic opened, he didn't go out at all. When there were patients, he would prescribe some medicine. When there were no patients, he would just stay in the clinic, play games, watch movies, sleep and daydream. He ordered 3 meals a day from the F&B department using the internal app of Emperor Dong's palace. In the past 5 or 6 days he didn't eat much, but he had consumed nearly 10 boxes of cola and gained 2 or 3 kilograms. He was developing from a little fatty to a big fatty. The connection with Li Tianlan was suddenly cut off. His connection with Xing Tian was suddenly cut off. Xianyuan Wushang immersed himself in the small clinic that he was very satisfied with. He played games and crazily spent money, watched movies and crazily complained. It was a happy and boring life. He was using this method to fade away from Emperor Dong's palace and Li Tianlan as quickly as possible, patiently waiting for the right time. However, after a few days of this carefree life, Xianyuan Wushang felt that something was wrong. To be exact, it started last night. The clinic was already closed at that time, and Xianyuan Wushang was sitting in front of the computer excitedly, instructing the virtual character in the virtual online game, who was dressed in godly equipment, to go to the instance dungeon. A faint uneasiness emerged from the depths of his heart without warning. This uneasiness began to grow stronger and stronger. He was restless and didn't sleep well all night. Xianyuan Wushang knew something was wrong, or something was going to happen. He had the most critical authority. Even if the real environment had almost completely blocked the earth at this time and suppressed his role, intuition was always there. The sudden uneasiness must mean that something was going to happen, or it had already happened. Xianyuan Wushang didn't sleep well all night. He frowned and analyzed, but he still couldn't figure out what was wrong. Now, the most worthy of his attention was undoubtedly Li Tianlan. But Xianyuan Wushang was very sure that there was nothing wrong with Li Tianlan. Now he had officially embarked on the journey back, and everything was going well. He was waiting for the next opportunity to guide him. Next, what was worth his attention was outside the Earth. The space-time corridor, the War God realm, the Emperor Palace. But he just paid attention to it. The destruction of the neutral camp was close at hand and couldn't be stopped. The Princess Royal of the space-time corridor came here first, which was enough to prove this. But whether it was his father, the War God, or the human emperor who hadn't officially taken action, they would all die, but they would never die so quickly. The war between the stars was not even a warm-up so far. According to the ordinary people's concept of time, it would take at least hundreds of years for it to completely end. And Qin Weibai was now in Emperor Dong's palace, which meant that the sister-in-law of the Lin clan headquarters wouldn't have too much problem. He had left a test bench in the sister-in-law's consciousness. If she really had a problem, the test bench would give him a clear warning. If there was no problem, what else could there be? Jiang Shangyu? The news of Unknown's death could be confirmed. The War God personally took action, and also used a divine form that Li Tianlan hadn't activated. In any case, Unknown couldn't have survived. Jiang Shangyu did have a great advantage, but he couldn't be a threat at all in the near future. The real environment was the same for them. Xianyuan Wushang was currently in a state of being blocked, which meant that Jiang Shangyu couldn't threaten Emperor Dong's palace. Wang Tianzong? If something unexpected happened to Wang Tianzong, the saint who was currently responsible for treating Wang Tianzong would definitely tell Lin Shi as soon as possible. And Lin Shi would also pass the news to him and Xing Tian as soon as possible. So Wang Tianzong was not a problem. No matter how Xianyuan Wushang thought about it, he couldn't figure out where the problem was. He thought about it all night. After breakfast, he didn't bother to go to the bedroom on the third floor, so he directly fell asleep in front of the computer. It was lunchtime when he was woken up by the phone. The clinic was quiet and cold, and no one visited it in the morning. Xianyuan Wushang rubbed his eyes and answered the phone. He yawned and said hello. On the other end of the phone, Xing Tian's thunderous voice sounded, low and confused. Your Highness, I don't feel good. Xianyuan Wushang's heart sank for no reason, and his sleepiness disappeared instantly. If his uneasiness yesterday was just an accident, it was obviously a little unusual that Xing Tian, who also had the authority, also had a premonition. What's going on? Xianyuan Wushang said in a low voice. I don't know. Xing Tian's voice was hoarse. There's nothing unreasonable in my logic. I don't know what's wrong. Xianyuan Wushang's eyes kept flickering. Both of them had a premonition, but they didn't know what was going on. In this case, it probably meant that the thing that made them uneasy hadn't happened yet. But what on earth was it? Come to me. Xianyuan Wushang thought for a moment and said slowly. Xing Tian said yes and hung up the phone. Xianyuan Wushang went into the bathroom and washed his face with cold water. Then he picked up the phone and dialed a number. After a long wait, the phone was connected. Lin Shi's voice sounded from the other end of the phone. What's up? Where are you? Xianyuan Wushang frowned. In addition to Lin Shi's voice, there was continuous noise on the phone. The apostle is messing with his base. I came to have a look. What's the matter? When did you become interested in his things? Xianyuan Wushang asked. Lin Shi chuckled and didn't say anything. Xianyuan Wushang thought for a moment and said directly, I always feel that something is going to happen. Have you encountered any problems recently? Although Lin Shi and Li Tianlan were destined to stand on opposite sides in this case, no matter what, whether it was Xianyuan Wushang or Lin Shi, the most important purpose of their coming here was to ensure Li Tianlan's smooth return. In this matter, there was naturally nothing that the two sides couldn't communicate. His authority was different from Lin Shi's, so there were naturally differences. At least, Lin Shi didn't have this kind of premonition that didn't involve himself. Lin Shi was silent for a moment, and seemed a little confused. What do you think? Xianyuan Wushang paused and said calmly. Xing Tian reminded me. Xing Tian doesn't have enough authority. Under the suppression of the real environment, isn't it normal for his premonition to be chaotic? Lin Shi said lightly. His premonition can't be wrong. Xianyuan Wushang said in a low voice. Just because Xing Tian is actually not a human? Lin Shi laughed. He should be your pen, right? Or your logical model. In other words, you are Xing Tian, right? Xianyuan Wushang's eyes suddenly narrowed. He held the phone and was silent for half a minute. Then he said lightly, How did you find out? I found out when I fought with King Wei in the starry sky. In fact, that place still can't get rid of the suppression of the real environment. Whether it is King Wei, Yumi, or Saint, our real combat strength is less than 1/3 of our peak state. But Xing Tian's authority is 2 levels lower than ours, but the effect he exerts is somewhat incredible. This is obviously not normal. Lin Shi said lightly. And the name Xing Tian itself is a bit strange. He is the ancient war god of the human clan. If he has nothing to do with that person, under the attention of the will of the world, who would dare to give him this name? Also, when we were chatting, we once talked about returning. We have only been fighting in the divinity realm for a short time, and our foundation is weak. But the space-time corridor is different. Only then did I realize that you, the 9th prince, look like a harmless saint, but in fact, I am far from your match. Who knows how many times you have returned? The title of saint is just your authority that is exposed to the outside world. If Xing Tian is really Xing Tian, then it is impossible that he has not reached the 7th level of authority by now. But if you are the return of the ancient war god, all this can be explained. Xianyuan Wushang's expression was somewhat indifferent. So your highness, the 9th prince, in fact there are no 2 guides at all. From the beginning to the end, the space-time corridor has only prepared 1 guide for his majesty, and that is yourself. Xingtian is the core of your observer authority, right? Only in this way can you be sure that your feeling is not wrong. TSK, you should have returned more than once, right? I am very curious about your third authority. Is it martial arts? There is no point in saying this. Xianyuan Wushang said blandly. The most important thing is that now I can be sure that there is something wrong at present, but I do not know what the problem is. Lin Shi also fell silent. After a while he slowly said, the only thing I can be sure of is that the problem is not with me. I can be sure of this. Xianyuan Wushang was thoughtful. He did not doubt Lin Shi's words. Although people who climbed on the path of martial arts did not have an almost omnidirectional premonition like him, they were extremely sensitive to their own instincts. It was a basic quality to seek good fortune and avoid bad luck. In the current environment, if Lin Shi's instincts did not remind him of anything, then there would be no problem on his side. But what on earth was the problem? Something happened after we came here. Or even before we came here, something might have happened. Jiang Shangyu's existence made any possibility possible. Is it possible that the location of Miracle City was exposed a long time ago? So, Lin Shi slowly analyzed. You mean the Order Camp's expedition? Xianyuan Wushang shook his head subconsciously. Impossible. Their top experts can't act at will. Even if there is an expedition, it is only at the peak of the apostle level. The heaven-deceiving king guards the rotating galaxy. If the expedition really started, the warning would have come long ago. A peak expert who deceives authority, even if he is not as good as the eldest princess, is enough to do too many things. Lin Shi was silent. In fact, in the face of the enemy, the heaven-deceiving king did have too many ways, including deceiving distance, deceiving perception, and even deceiving the enemy's thoughts. If he just wanted to guard the Miracle City, he could play tricks. At the very least, he had time to send a warning. If the so-called long-range expert had not yet approached the rotating galaxy, it would not have caused Xianyuan Wushang to feel uneasy. So the problem was still not this. Then what the hell is it? Xianyuan Wushang felt a headache and a little scared. There was obviously a problem, but he could not find it. This undoubtedly meant that when the problem happened, there might be unexpected trouble. I'm hanging up. Xianyuan Wushang hammered his forehead, said simply and hung up the phone. He walked to the window and looked into the distance through the flowers in front of the villa. In the distance, a pleasure boat was floating on the artificial lake in Emperor Dong's palace. It was drizzling outside, and the sword energy was floating in every corner of Emperor Dong's palace. On the pleasure boat, Xianyuan Wushang could see Li Tianlan and Qin Wei by there, loving each other, but he could not see what they were doing. Xianyuan Wushang looked at the lake dully, as if his mind had gone to another world. The door of the clinic was pushed open from the outside. Xianyuan Wushang turned his head slightly. It was not Xingtian, but a beautiful woman about 27 or 28 years old. The woman's face was slightly pale, and there was a hint of weakness in her voice. Doctor, I'll prescribe some medicine for you, okay? Xianyuan Wushang smiled. The woman looked confused. But I haven't told you where I feel uncomfortable. No matter where you feel uncomfortable, you have to take medicine. There is no other way. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head. But doctor, let me say it first. I'll prescribe you medicine first. You can talk as long as you want when you leave here, okay? Xianyuan Wushang looked down and rummaged through the medicine box. The woman's face grew paler, and her voice seemed to tremble. She said hoarsely, "Are you crazy?" She turned and walked to the door, cursing the quack in her heart. A small bottle was thrown from behind her. The woman turned around subconsciously, and with a little coldness in her hand, she grabbed the bottle. She was a civil servant in Emperor Dong's palace, and she was in charge of intelligence gathering and sorting out on the third floor of the castle. She looked slim and delicate, but she was also a graduate of the Sky Academy. There were many women like her in Emperor Dong's palace, who looked delicate but were actually very fierce. In a few months, there would only be more women like her. 3 times a day, 1 pill each time. Take it with warm water. Just take it later. Xianyuan Wushang smiled gently. Of course, if you don't believe me, just throw it away when you go out. The pale woman looked at Xianyuan Wushang with a complicated expression. She hesitated for a moment, and then slowly walked out with the bottle. Xianyuan Wushang walked back to the window, thinking carefully. The door of the clinic was pushed open again. Xing Tian walked in with heavy footsteps. He closed the door, pressed the button to close the clinic, and came to Xianyuan Wushang's side. He said in a low voice, "Your Highness, did you find anything wrong?" Xianyuan Wushang turned around and glanced at him. "There's nothing wrong in all aspects. It shouldn't have happened yet. It's normal that it hasn't happened, but there should be a direction," Xianyuan Wushang said in a low voice. He hooked his finger slightly, and a cube shining with a dark blue light flew out of Xing Tian's chest. It was a very small cube, or to be exact, a Rubik's cube. The Rubik's cube shone with a dark blue light, and every ray of light seemed to be condensed with countless words and lines. This was Xianyuan Wushang's logic model. It was also the core of his authority system. Xianyuan Wushang took the Rubik's cube and played with it. Then he took out an identical blue Rubik's cube from his chest. The two Rubik's cubes attracted each other, and instantly merged into one. The two Rubik's cubes instantly expanded several times. It no longer looked like a Rubik's cube, but a cube with countless intricate structures inside. The inside of the cube was filled with many tiny structures, and glowing gears spun slightly. Moving, a large number of seemingly meaningless words were constantly surging inside. And these words, which ordinary people couldn't see or understand, became stories in Xianyuan Wushang's eyes. All of the stories were closely connected, and there were no logical loopholes. So what's going on? He muttered to himself. Under normal circumstances, since he had a premonition, even if there weren't any loopholes in his logic model, there would at least be signs. As the ninth prince of the space-time corridor, there was almost nothing he couldn't pay attention to, and there were no secrets he couldn't understand. The neutral camp was different from the other two camps, and he and Lin Shi were also different. Lin Shi's foundation was too shallow. Even if he was talented, he still needed to accumulate experience. In fact, Lin Shi was right. If he really fought without any scruples, Xianyuan Wushang could fight a group of Lin Shi with all his strength. This was the real combat strength formed by the control of authority after returning several times. This time, Lin Shi was the ninth prince of the corridor of time and space. It was also because he became Li Tianlan's guide that he was able to enter the core of the corridor of time and space. But in fact, before he died last time, he was already one of the core figures of the corridor of time and space. At this stage, the corridor of time and space had no secrets for him. Others might have secrets, but he knew everything related to the stability of the human clan. Since he knew something, it would exist in the logic model he formed. So as long as he had a premonition, his logic model would show signs. In other words, if something happened that didn't appear in his logic model, it proved that it wasn't something he paid attention to, and naturally wouldn't arouse his premonition. But now he had a premonition, but his logic model didn't move. What did this mean? The suppression of the real environment? This was too exaggerated. Did anything happen to you recently? Xianyuan Wushang asked. Xing Tian shook his head silently and looked at the cube in Xianyuan Wushang's hand. No. He was now the leader of a patrol team in Emperor Dong's palace, in charge of 4 team members. He patrolled for 8 hours a day and didn't do any specific work. He just wandered around Emperor Dong's palace. Now Li Tianlan was in Emperor Dong's palace, and every corner of the palace was covered by his sword energy. What problem could there be? Even if there was a problem, Li Tianlan could solve it with a casual move. So now Xing Tian really had nothing to do. He talked with several team members symbolically, and after work, except for 8 hours of patrolling, he basically slept for 15 hours. He encountered everything. That's really strange. Xianyuan Wushang muttered to himself, and pulled out a jet-black writing brush from Xing Tian's chest. The brush changed in his hand and became a pencil. Xianyuan Wushang thought for a while, and pointed at the logic model in front of him with the pencil. The blue light on the logic model shone slightly, and inside it, a tiny gear that was hard to see with a microscope, turned gently. A small part of the gear turned into an extremely thick book. Xianyuan Wushang opened it silently. The book was full of words. To be exact, it was a story. It was a story that didn't have much content, but it had all sorts of details. Xianyuan Wushang read it quietly. The story was purely handwritten, and the pencils were extremely clear. The story was about a young man named Li Tianlan who left a camp on the border with an admission notice. He carried countless secrets and the hope of a declining family on his back. Under the secret attention of many people, he came to a city called Huating, where he met a woman named Qin Weibai and a series of events happened. From a bystander's point of view, this story was not up to standard, because it was too messy and inexplicable, and there was no such thing as a protagonist or a supporting role. Every word, every picture, every word, every action, every person who appeared in the story, every sentence, every action, why he said this, why he did this, all of it had a lot of descriptions similar to narration. All the inner activities of Li Tianlan in the story. All the behind-the-scenes planning of Qin Weibai in the story. All of them were clearly outlined in the most detailed description, so it was so verbose that it gave people a splitting headache. Moreover, the timeline in the story was extremely messy. It would often jump from 1 second to several decades ago. It would even constantly affect one's worldview and jump to another time and space. Many times, some of the dialogues in the book could not even be determined if they were spoken or imagined. Xianyuan Wushang read the story quietly, watching the Sky Academy, watching the final battle of East Island, and watching the chaos in Snow Country. The handwriting in the story began to blur from clear, from neat to messy. Xianyuan Wushang frowned. During the chaos in Snow Country, the story already had problems that couldn't be adjusted. Large patches of alterations kept appearing, countless clearly written content disappeared inexplicably, and the rest of the story began to be intermittent. The irresistible pressure of the world's will, and the real environment directly pressed down when the story had problems. The whole story began to become fragmented, so the structure became more and more messy, and the overall structure of the story was on the verge of collapse under the absolute pressure of the real environment. It seemed that some content that had been written or not written would be completely erased by the real environment at any time. So the whole story began to change, and the content that should not have appeared replaced a large amount of content that would disappear after the whole story was written. The whole story began to become more messy, and a large amount of unreasonable content made the whole story stumble. Between the lines, one could see the indignation and impetuosity that could not be vented, and the helplessness of being caught off guard and unprepared in the face of the suppression of the real environment. The story continued to develop and deviate after the chaos in Snow Country. Xianyuan Wushang continued to read faster and faster. He watched the people in the story sweep across Beihai, watched the people in the story leave the desert prison, watched the situation in the story begin to stalemate in Zhongzhou State, and watched the people in the story return to their Emperor Dong's palace. He saw the Emperor Dong's palace in the story was raining, and the sword energy was flying. The man and woman who supported the story were boating on the lake, snuggling up to each other. The perspective of the story zoomed out, and in front of a window in a detached villa, a fat man in the story was also reading the story in his hand. An indescribable chill suddenly rushed out of Xianyuan Wushang's heart, freezing his brain and heart. He held the pen, and it seemed that he wanted to continue writing the story, but the problem in his heart was completely exposed at this moment. In his sight, on the lake in the distance, a gently drifting boat began to approach the shore. Li Tianlan stood at the bow of the boat. Qin Weibai stood behind him, as if she wanted to approach, but she was hesitating, and her face was pale. The picture began to become clear. The premonition that had been making him uneasy screamed wildly to remind him. Finally, the ominous feeling was shattered. Xianyuan Wushang's heart trembled, and he subconsciously lowered his head. He did not know when, but the pencil in his hand had begun to sketch in the book, and a new chapter of the story had been formed. The content of the story was completely reflected in his eyes. It could be erased, but it could not be changed. The corner of Xianyuan Wushang's mouth moved. A mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth. "Your Highness." Xing Tian held Xianyuan Wushang's body. All the premonitions of crisis in his mind had disappeared, because the fact had happened, and it had become a reality. Xianyuan Wushang breathed rapidly and he murmured, "Oh no, it's over." Xing Tian glanced at the book that had been pulled out of the logic model. The book, stained with Xianyuan Wushang's blood, glowed with an incomparably hazy light. The moment Xianyuan Wushang put down the pencil, the square logic model began to shrink, and the book automatically closed and was sucked in. With just a glance, Xing Tian had already seen the story that Xianyuan Wushang had just unconsciously continued to weave under the arrangement of the world's will. It was just a new chapter. The chapter name, Memory Disorder. Xing Tian's pupils instantly contracted. Chapter 1246. Confused and in a trance. It was hard to describe Qin Weibai's current feelings. It was as if the closest connection with the person she cared about the most had been completely cut off. Memories flooded his mind like a tidal wave. She quietly looked at Li Tianlan standing in front of her, and there was a suffocating feeling in her heart. The distance between her and Li Tianlan was not far. She could even clearly feel Li Tianlan's constantly changing emotions, as well as a touch of alienation and doubt. Vaguely, Qin Weibai understood that she might have done something wrong. To be exact, she should have said something wrong. The specific changes should be from the beginning of their first time. That was the deepest and clearest memory of the two of them. But now thinking about it, there was an indescribable sense of confusion. Qin Weibai tried hard to think, but the more she thought, the more confused her heart became. It was as if countless images were mixed together in a disorderly manner. It was a mess, but it was natural. It was like countless Li Tianlan, countless Qin Weibai, and countless firsts were completely integrated into one place. Qin Weibai could feel Li Tianlan's astonishment and disbelief at that moment when she talked about this topic. The feeling was very faint, but it was extremely deep. This astonishment soon turned into doubt, uncertainty, and doubt. All kinds of emotions surged, making the two of them suddenly extremely awkward and stiff. A long-lost panic spread in Qin Weibai's heart. Qin Weibai had no idea what she should do now. Her clear and calm mind at any time was completely stiff. Act cute and pitiful? Several methods that were very effective for Li Tianlan in the past flashed in her mind. She wanted to do it, but she couldn't do it at all. Because of embarrassment. There was such an emotion as embarrassment between husband and wife. Qin Weibai never thought that this emotion would appear between her and Li Tianlan. What hadn't they done? Both of them had a deep understanding of each other, and they even felt as if they had become one. Occasionally there might be shame, anger, resentment, or helplessness, but no matter what kind of emotion they felt, there was one thing that was certain. He and she both thought that they were the closest people in the world. Awkward. How could it be possible? But such an emotion appeared. It appeared when Li Tianlan had some doubts and confusion. It was not until this moment that Qin Weibai realized that she was not as calm as she had always thought. Countless memory fragments tumbled in his mind. What she had just said by accident must have deviated from what he remembered. That was why he was confused. And Qin Weibai. She had been emphasizing that she and the master of Samsara Palace were the same person. There was nothing different about them. They had the same looks, the same temperament, the same thoughts, the same memories, the same hobbies. To a certain extent, they were really the same person. The saints, the knights, and the others all accepted this. But was it really the same? If it was true, why didn't Flaming Fire and Military Counselor accept it? She inherited the feelings of the master of Samsara Palace for Li Tianlan. But in the end he did not completely inherit that calmness. Because their pride was the same. Qin Weibai lowered her head gently. In his line of sight was the crystal-clear fruit platter. Qin Weibai picked up a grape and peeled it. She carefully tugged at the corner of Li Tianlan's clothes. "Do you want some grapes?" "No need." Li Tianlan's body shook slightly. He shook his head and turned to look at Qin Weibai. His eyes were a little dazed. Qin Weibai's whole spirit was completely tense. "Sit." Li Tianlan sat down and pointed to the seat opposite him. The sword energy pushed the boat to the shore. The atmosphere became more and more awkward. Qin Weibai bit her lip and walked over stubbornly. Li Tianlan's body seemed to want to move subconsciously. "I want to sit next to you," Qin Weibai said softly. She had always sat next to him, eating, drinking tea, and watching TV, instead of sitting face to face and being serious. Li Tianlan hesitated. Qin Weibai had directly sat down next to him, her arms tightly wrapped around his. "What's wrong with you?" she asked softly. Her voice was calm, but her heart was unprecedentedly uneasy. Li Tianlan looked at her quietly, and his eyes became more and more confused. Qin Weibai forced a smile. Li Tianlan shook his head. "I don't know." This was the truest truth in his truest state of mind. Some things had been slowly accumulating, and would eventually break out when he was unprepared. Li Tianlan, and Qin Weibai's first time. This was the most precious picture in his heart. It was an unforgettable night, and it was integrated into the depths of his soul. What was Li Tianlan at that time? A poor boy with a little potential who had not seen much of the world, and had just walked out of the border camp with too many things on his back. That was all. The identity of the heir of the Li family? Glory. Glory my ass. The karma carried by this identity could be said that Li Tianlan might walk into a desperate situation at every step, and there were invisible dangers everywhere around him. At that time, Li Tianlan was only in the ice-condensing realm after repracticing martial arts. He had the strength to rival the thunder-shocking realm, but compared with his identity, this strength was equivalent to no means to resist risks. No one knew that Li Tianlan was under great pressure, uneasiness, and even fear at that time. What genius, what young heavenly sun, what rising star, what future invincible realm? What did the future invincible realm mean? In Li Tianlan's eyes, the so-called future invincible realm meant that he was nothing now. At that time he was just a young man who desperately needed time to grow up, but he had to struggle in the face of strong enemies all the time. He dared not think of anything and had to be careful in everything he did. What was Qin Weibai at that time? On the surface, she was a strong woman who controlled the Pre-Qin International Group. She was the outstanding beauty, known as the first beauty in Zhongzhou State. She was the goddess that countless big shots in the dark world dreamed of, but did not dare to get close to. She was the highest will that could dominate the Samsara Palace. She was the top figure who could talk about cooperation with Zhongzhou State. She was the snow in the sky and the moon in the clouds in his heart, hazy, peerless, and inviolable. Li Tianlan still remembered the shock and amazement that seemed to invade his soul when he first saw Qin Weibai. That feeling was indescribable. Her perfection and delicacy came to his face like a dream, and he even dared not have any extra thoughts. He still remembered that when he took a sip of the water that Qin Weibai had drunk, his heartbeat accelerated and his face flushed. He still remembered the excitement and attachment when she leaned against him to take that photo in the dormitory of the Sky Academy. Whether Li Tianlan was willing to admit it or not, in fact, when he first saw Qin Weibai, he was a real conqueror. Qin Weibai had always occupied the role of the leader. Even in the future, the dominance of the two of them would quietly change with Li Tianlan taking the lead. It was also Qin Weibai who quietly changed the relationship between the two of them. Because of this, how could Li Tianlan's first time with Qin Weibai in that state of mind be like what Qin Weibai had just said? At that time, when Li Tianlan faced Qin Weibai, it was like facing the unique treasure in the world. He carefully protected her with love and affection from the bottom of his heart. This kind of love and affection had not changed until now. Maybe it was a little pretentious to say it, but Li Tianlan could be sure that his feelings for Qin Weibai could really be described with the word love. But this kind of love, this kind of feeling, this kind of love, when facing Qin Weibai now, there was a kind of alienation that Li Tianlan himself could not describe. This kind of feeling was too faint, so faint that Li Tianlan almost did not have the slightest awareness, but it always existed. Until Qin Weibai just talked about their first time. Her content and Li Tianlan's memory caused an irreconcilable conflict. At that moment, Li Tianlan actually felt that Qin Weibai was extremely strange, and the alienation that he had not noticed in the past suddenly began to become obvious. When did this feeling start? Looking back carefully, it seemed to be after the chaos in Snow Country. But Li Tianlan himself could not be sure about this. He could not tell where this feeling came from, but from time to time, he felt that Qin Weibai seemed to be slightly different from before. This difference seemed to be real, but also like his illusion. This sense of alienation accumulated little by little, giving him the most intuitive feeling that his feelings for Qin Weibai should not appear in the woman who was with him now. Finally, today, this feeling directly reached the peak and became extremely obvious. When we first did it, I did not hit you, nor did I say that you were coquettish. Li Tianlan looked into Qin Weibai's eyes with a touch of temptation. Did you forget that night? I remembered it wrong. Qin Weibai had already returned to normal in the shortest time possible, holding Li Tianlan's arm more tightly. Because of this, so you are angry? Not angry. Li Tianlan shook his head. I can't tell that kind of feeling. You said before that I respected you a little too much. Do you still remember? Qin Weibai giggled, and her bright eyes regained their liveliness. I didn't say that. I said at that time that I didn't like the way you were careful in front of me. I am your woman, and I belong to you. I need you to discipline me well, so I will be obedient. If you respect me too much, it will only drive us farther and farther away. I hope you can discipline me into the most perfect woman in your heart, not a goddess, or I won't feel owned at all. A faint body fragrance floated around Li Tianlan, and Qin Weibai's voice was enchanting and charming. You are a bad person. That night, you put something dirty on my face, and you asked me to call you daddy. You also asked me to wear that kind of thing. I didn't wear it, so you hit me. Li Tianlan's body was obviously relaxed. What Qin Weibai said was the original words of that day. What happened later was also some small fun between husband and wife that only he and Qin Weibai knew. In Li Tianlan's memory, it seemed that from that time, he began to dominate Qin Weibai and really let his goddess become his woman. Under his discipline, Qin Weibai also became more and more obedient. Are you planning something bad? Qin Weibai touched Li Tianlan's chin. Her face was red, but she looked into his eyes very bravely. The memory of the first time in his mind began to become more and more chaotic. But it was only the memory of that night. The memory after that was very clear. Li Tianlan's test and suspicion had been very obvious in the question just now. But what Qin Weibai was least afraid of was this kind of test and all kinds of details that only the two of them knew. This was the most effective thing that could prove something. She answered without hesitation, and most directly felt Li Tianlan's relaxation. No, nothing. Li Tianlan shook his head subconsciously. Then tell me what you were thinking about just now. Qin Weibai touched Li Tianlan's head and tried to make her voice stable. I can't explain it clearly. Just now, Li Tianlan seemed to be thinking. Wild imagination, right? He held Qin Weibai in his arms. His eyes seemed to be more sober than before, with thinking and incomparably deep. Qin Weibai bit her lip and took out her trump card. Carry me back to the room. She held Li Tianlan's neck and gently bit her little white teeth. I thought you were angry just now. It scared me to death. Today, I will punish you well. Li Tianlan held Qin Weibai up. He would never refuse this kind of punishment. He would never refuse this kind of punishment. The pencil scratched on the paper. Xianyuan Wushang wrote this sentence, and then there was a long pause. It was thinking that paused. The tip of the pencil was still moving, but what was written was not words, but a large number of smears. He could weave a story. But the privacy between Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai was a forbidden area that he absolutely could not touch. So he let the pencil in his hand scribble on the paper page after page. When the pencil stopped, he reread the story he had woven. The story was so detailed and long-winded that it added up to tens of millions of words. Strictly speaking, it was no longer a story, but a huge and complicated web. To be more precise, every detail in the story and every psychological activity of the characters were logic. The logic of the characters and the overall logic of the story. No matter whether the logic in it was normal or not, under the confinement of the logic model, all the logic was reasonable. Xianyuan Wushang put down the pencil and put the book in front of him back into the logic model. After thinking for a while, he took the book out and put it back again. After several times, he shook his head with a somewhat complicated expression. So, Her Highness Qin Weibai's memory is messed up and revealed a flaw? Xing Tian stood behind Xianyuan Wushang. His huge body glowed with a blue light similar to the logic model, and his voice was a little low. It should not be a memory disorder. It's just that the positioning is a little messed up. Xianyuan Wushang was a little speechless. I don't know what the specific reason is. The weaving traces have been erased. It should be something private between the couple. Sister-in-law's body has further recovered in the headquarters of the Lin clan, so there is a tendency for her memory to merge here. She just couldn't distinguish Li Tianlan and Dongqing Huangtu. The things in the two spaces are a little blurred, so she took Dongqing Huangtu's thing as Li Tianlan's. That's about it, so it made Big Brother suspicious. What impact will it have? Xing Tian was a little confused. I don't know. Xianyuan Wushang smiled bitterly, separated the logic model again, and fused half of the logic model and the pencil in his hand with Xing Tian again. I can only try my best to suppress this matter, but what kind of person is Big Brother? Now that he has doubts, I'm afraid this matter can't be suppressed for long. Xing Tian was silent. Ensuring Li Tianlan's smooth return was the most important task of the space-time corridor at present. Sending the ninth prince here had fully proved the attitude of the space-time corridor toward this matter. There really could not be any accidents. But Qin Weibai, anything that Her Highness did could have a huge impact and accident on His Majesty Li Tianlan. How is Her Highness? Xing Tian asked in a low voice. Actually, she's fine. Xianyuan Wushang thought for a moment. But it takes time, which is what I'm most afraid of. He pursed his lips, and his eyes became more and more helpless. Recently, Qin Weibai had been making continuous progress in the spiritual field, some of which she didn't even realize herself. All this showed that Her Highness, who was currently in the headquarters of the Lin clan, was constantly recovering. Now the Lin clan was worried about the injury of the master of Samsara Palace, but in Xianyuan Wushang's mind, as long as that injury was stabilized, it was the least worrying. The reason why the master of Samsara Palace hadn't regained consciousness was that her consciousness was now trapped in her own space of consciousness. The space similar to the eternal furnace was still changing. Xianyuan Wushang left a test bench there, which could speed up the recovery process of the master of Samsara Palace to a certain extent. But the most important thing was to speed up the process of her return, at least to let her realize something. The Lin clan had never given up on the treatment of the master of Samsara Palace. Xianyuan Wushang had a detailed understanding of this. He had estimated the time it would take for the master of Samsara Palace to be in the depths of his consciousness. Combined with the current situation of the master of Samsara Palace, he estimated that it would take about 5 years for the injury of the master of Samsara Palace to completely stabilize and then wake up. About 20 years later, Qin Weibai could initially return. With the awakening of the master of Samsara Palace, Qin Weibai could now also find Li Tianlan and the tree in her dreams. Xianyuan Wushang was very clear about what the tree meant. It was the foundation of Qin Weibai's authority, but now it had been polluted, or it could be said that it had been severely damaged. And the virtual shadow sitting under the tree was the most important divine form in Li Tianlan's martial arts authority. 9 deaths. When the master of Samsara Palace woke up, it meant the beginning of the return. Her authority would naturally recover, and 9 deaths would smoothly leave Qin Weibai's space of consciousness and return to Li Tianlan. With this divine form, Li Tianlan could smoothly set foot in the real supreme domain, and completely master the core characteristics of the level 8 authority of martial arts. At that time, he and Li Tianlan would join forces, and could already fight against the will of the world in a real environment to a certain extent. Thus, he would tell Li Tianlan most of the truth, and let Li Tianlan begin to formally return. And before this period, that was within 5 years, Li Tianlan could not go to see the master of Samsara Palace no matter what. Both of their authorities had begun to awaken initially, and they were in the process of formally finding themselves. Their own authorities were extremely fragile. Qin Weibai could be a buffer, but once Li Tianlan got close to the real master of Samsara Palace, their authorities were likely to have a fundamental conflict. One was the founder of the neutral camp. The other was the only supreme person in the human clan, who currently held the peak authority of the order camp. There were only 2 possibilities for the two to meet in this state. Either they merged with each other, and became one person, or their authorities were as incompatible as fire and water, and they both died. Either result was not something that the space-time corridor could bear. Qin Weibai's buffer was exactly right. But once Li Tianlan found out the truth that Qin Weibai hid, in the next 5 years, in order to stabilize Li Tianlan, they could only tell Li Tianlan that the master of Samsara Palace had died. It was a deception, but it was a last resort. How would Li Tianlan react after knowing the news? That was what Xianyuan Wushang dared not think about. If we tell His Majesty that Her Highness has died, the corner of Xing Tian's mouth moved. His Majesty may not be able to bear this kind of blow. Be confident. He definitely can't bear it. Xianyuan Wushang said with a wry smile. You won't understand the feelings between big brother and sister-in-law. Their bond is too deep. From the beginning to the present, if they could really let it go, they wouldn't be them. In the first battle, all kinds of information showed that sister-in-law had a chance to survive, but she forcibly affected the situation of the final battle, and barely fought to a situation where both sides suffered. In order not to let her die completely, Big Brother separated the divine body and the 9 deaths to suppress her authority core. When he was seriously injured, he separated the core again. At that time, he didn't even make it to the end of the world. Now they have been reincarnated several times in a row, and they barely returned. But this kind of bond is impossible for Big Brother to let go. And in this life, most of Big Brother's current achievements come from sister-in-law's support. If we lie to him that sister-in-law has died, God knows what will happen. But no matter what happens, it will definitely have a huge impact on the process of his return. Xing Tian thought for a while and said softly, but now there is Qin Weibai. Does Your Highness also think that the current Qin Weibai and the master of Samsara Palace are 2 different people? Of course they are the same person. Xianyuan Wushang sighed and said, but the premise is that they can only be one person when they are together. If one dies and the other lives, then she is not her, and she is not her. Xing Tian was silent. After a long while he said softly, can you still delay it? This is the only chance. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head and said, now Big Brother has noticed it. Even if he hasn't officially returned, the real mark is there. I can only make up what happened today, and let the model give today's matter reasonable logic. But even so, it is difficult to dispel Big Brother's idea. It is hard to say what will happen next. It depends on when Big Brother realizes it. If, Xing Tian's low and worried voice sounded, if His Majesty really can't bear it, there can be no if. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head and said, I'm afraid this matter can't be hidden. In the end, Big Brother will inevitably be deceived, so we can only use other forces to stimulate his spirit. For example? Xing Tian asked. For example, Big Brother's daughter. Xianyuan Wushang said softly. It seems that we should find sister-in-law Yuetong. Chapter 1247. Where was Wang Yuetong now? The Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace were eager to know the answer to this question. Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian also wanted to know the answer now. But it was just a thought. Compared with Li Tianlan and Wang Shengxiao, who tried to find a needle in a haystack regardless of manpower, material and financial resources, Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian knew the result from the beginning. It was impossible to find her. Even if Zhongzhou State, no, even billions of people in the world were placed in front of Li Tianlan, and asked him to look at them one by one, Li Tianlan could not find Wang Yuetong. When she left Beihai alone, no one could understand the sadness and grievance in Wang Yuetong's heart. She could not stand in the position of her family to be Li Tianlan's enemy. She could not stand on Li Tianlan's side against the family that gave birth to her and raised her. The moment Li Tianlan set foot in Beihai, Wang Yuetong herself had become a joke of the Wang family of Beihai. The Wang family of Beihai had reasons not to compromise. Li Tianlan also had personal affairs that he could not let go. Wang Yuetong was caught in the middle. The 2 sides that squeezed her might have more or less considered her existence, but in the end, they did not compromise. Because they could not let go and could not retreat. So on Mount Dibing that year, Li Tianlan's sword directly pierced Wang Yuetong's heart. At that moment, the reality was so naked and bloody in front of Wang Yuetong. There were some things that she really could not change or escape. She was caught in the middle, and could only be in a dilemma. So she used her body and even her life to face Li Tianlan's edge. Death was death. She was not afraid of death. Why would she care about love and family? She did not care about her own dilemma. She just intended to destroy everything she had in exchange for Li Tianlan and Mount Dibing not to be in a dilemma. After that sword, Emperor Dong sweeping across Beihai completely came to an end. It was like an incomparably grand farce. Silver Moon Sky Light Town Beihai. But after that sword, Li Tianlan did not kill her in the end. The fact was undeniable. If it were not for Wang Yuetong, no one could be sure what the whole Mount Dibing, all the elites, all the forces, and all the foundations would be tormented by Li Tianlan, who was full of killing intent at that time. No matter what it was, at least it wouldn't be like 2 years ago when they finally gave up. Li Tianlan finally took a step back. In Wang Yuetong's mind, all the affection, love, promise, and future between her and Li Tianlan were completely shattered when Li Tianlan took a step back. There was nothing left, not even a drop. Although the Wang family of Beihai suffered heavy losses and lost face, at least because of Li Tianlan's retreat, its foundation was preserved. This was what Wang Yuetong had protected at all costs. It was also because of this desperate action that Wang Yuetong thought she had done everything she could, and repaid the Wang family of Beihai for raising her. What else could he do after that? Those who should be opposing each other were still opposing each other. If he stayed, would he continue to make things difficult for both parties and himself? That sword strike broke the relationship between her and Li Tianlan, as well as the cause and effect between her and the Wang family of Beihai. So when she left Mount Dibing, her mood should be very complicated. There was reluctance, sadness, and regret. But it should also be very resolute. He didn't put himself, Li Tianlan, or Beihai in a difficult position. No one knew whether she was calm or relaxed. But in this situation, Xianyuan Wushang was sure that Wang Yuetong really wanted to hide. We can't find her. Xing Tian said with certainty. Yes, we can't find her. Xianyuan Wushang sighed and suddenly smiled. It's unrealistic to find Yuetong directly, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a direction. It was still possible to find Wang Yuetong before he and Xing Tian arrived, with the power of the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace. But after they came here, this possibility was basically a theoretical possibility. Perhaps from the first second they arrived here, some people's eyes had fallen on Wang Yuetong and her daughter, Princess Royal of the Time Corridor. A peak expert who cheated authority, Xianyuan Wushang had confirmed that Princess Royal was now with Wang Yuetong's daughter. This was not a rumor, but a fact told to him by Princess Royal herself. Wang Yuetong really wanted to hide. Once Princess Royal confirmed her mother's thoughts, would others still want to find her? It was simply a fool's talk. What did a peak expert who cheated authority mean? It meant that even if Wang Yuetong stood in front of Li Tianlan now, he could not see her. If Princess Royal wanted to, she could make the whole world completely forget that Wang Yuetong had ever existed. All traces of her existence would disappear, and everyone's memory of her would fade away. It was an unbridled deception, and it was flawless, under the shroud of the Princess Royal's will, not to mention the fact that he had already been killed. Suppressed by the real environment, Xianyuan Wushang could hardly find Wang Yuetong even at his peak. But we can try to get the eldest princess to come find us. Xianyuan Wushang smiled honestly. Xing Tian's massive body shuddered involuntarily. When King Wei obtained a portion of the heart-shattering sword's sword intent, we were able to confirm that the energy of the heart-shattering sword originated from the eastern mountain. Xing Tian said, "It's just that we can confirm it. It might not be true. If our perception is deceived, then the energy of the heart-shattering sword may also originate from Star State." But we were deceived, so we were sure that it was in the eastern mountain. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head. It's hard to start from this aspect. And if we want to find Princess Royal, there's no need to play those fancy tricks. It's best to find a way to meet her honestly. Your Highness, don't you have anything that can directly contact Princess Royal? Xing Tian was a little confused. Why do you think I have such a thing? Xianyuan Wushang smiled helplessly. Xing Tian did not speak. Feng Qinggu, Princess Royal of the Time Corridor. Even in the space-time corridor, she was a symbolic existence. The first princess rarely went out and never interfered with anything. Over the course of a long time, she could only be seen in a few battles. Most of the time, she didn't exist in the space-time corridor. Does Princess Royal have any friends? Xing Tian asked. She has no friends. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head slightly. Not even acquaintances. After the ancient war, she admitted that she had committed a grave sin and sealed herself in the imperial palace, which is equivalent to cutting off all contact with the outside world. Then this time, Xing Tian was stunned. Xianyuan Wushang took a deep look at him, and did not hide anything. Xing Tian was the logical core of one of his privileges. In other words, Xing Tian was a part of him, so there was naturally no need to be cautious or suspicious. Of course it's to atone for her sins. The end is coming, so Princess Royal intends to make a key for herself. Xing Tian seemed to understand. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head and said slowly, I'll leave this matter to you. Eastern Mountain is not trustworthy, but the logical starting point is very obvious. And that is the North Sea. You can weave other logics from this starting point. When you really get close to or touch the truth, Princess Royal will naturally notice, and then you can find a way to let her meet us. If she doesn't want to, tell her that there are some problems in the process of His Majesty's return, and she will come. Xing Tian nodded and wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. If you have something to say it. Xianyuan Wushang walked back to his seat, opened a bottle of his favorite Coke, and said without looking up, Princess Royal is with His Majesty's daughter? Xing Tian deliberated over his tone. Xianyuan Wushang looked at Xing Tian, and was a little confused. What's the problem? Strictly speaking, Princess Royal is also Big Brother's daughter. So, Xing Tian said softly, has Princess Royal merged with His Majesty's daughter? Or has she replaced her? That won't happen. Xianyuan Wushang laughed. I don't know much about Princess Royal's authority, but generally speaking, she and Big Brother's daughter should be together in one body and two souls. As for what will happen in the final stage, no one can tell. If she wants to be the key, she must do something that she has never done before. But there is a high probability that the two will become two independent individuals, but they can also merge into a whole. The thoughts, memories, and souls between the two are all interconnected, like Qin Weibai and the Master of Samsara Palace. Xing Tian asked. Pretty much the same. Who can know the specifics? If I knew, I would have chosen fraud authority a long time ago. In terms of this authority, in the whole neutral camp, only this Princess Royal can reach above level 9. 5. Now King of Deception can't do it. Even Big Brother, who had all the authority at the beginning, didn't reach this level. He opened the drawer, took out a document, and looked at it carefully. This was the latest information sent from the laboratory of Emperor Dong's palace. It was recorded 12 hours ago, and it was the latest changes in Dongqing Rushi and Situ Wanjia's body data. Xianyuan Wushang looked at it quietly. He glanced through most of the data, including some data that the experts in the laboratory paid great attention to. What he paid most attention to were the 3 new data that appeared at the bottom of the document. Even the experts in the laboratory didn't know what they represented. Xianyuan Wushang provided Emperor Dong's palace with a special instrument to detect these 3 data. No one knew the specific function of the instrument. Also, no one knew the meaning of the 3 data except Xianyuan Wushang. 3 sets of data. The first represented spiritual strength. The second one represented the activity of thinking. The third represented the deepest level of subconsciousness. Xianyuan Wushang glanced at these 3 vital data, and felt a little regretful. It will take about 2 years for this sister-in-law to wake up. Only then can she be more stable in the future. 2 years. It's hard. I'm afraid things can't be suppressed for so long. Tribulation's situation is good. He will wake up in half a year. He shook his head. It's more reliable to find Yuetong. Why don't you believe in Her Highness Qin Weibai? Maybe His Majesty won't find anything in the end. Xing Tian tried to make a last-ditch struggle. If possible, he really didn't want to deal with that Princess Royal. Of course, I don't doubt this sister-in-law's means. Xianyuan Wushang said softly. But I don't doubt Jiang Shangyu's IQ. He also knows about this. It depends on when he takes action. Chapter 1248. At 5 o'clock in the morning, before dawn, Wang Shengxiao had already walked into a breakfast shop on the edge of Shenzhou City. The pace of life in Shenzhou was very slow. Few breakfast shops opened before 7 o'clock in the morning. If Wang Shengxiao didn't make an appointment in person, this shop with a special Rujiamo sign would usually open at 7:30 in the morning and close at 9:30 in the morning. It only sold 500 Rujiamos a day. Although it was a lot, it was never for money. It was in short supply all year round. Wang Shengxiao ordered 20 Rujiamos and 2 bowls of mutton soup. In the rising steam from the mutton soup, he picked up the Rujiamo and took a bite. The steamed bun was crispy, the meat was tender, and the fat was moderate. It was fragrant but not greasy. It's really. I haven't eaten it for a long time. Wang Shengxiao sighed softly. I've eaten it for so many years since I was a child, but I'm not tired of it. I don't know whether I'm great or Uncle Yuan's cooking is great. Of course I'm great. The middle-aged boss in an apron, who looked to be in his 50s, brought over 2 freshly made Rujiamos and scolded them with a smile. You 2 little rabbits ate here for several months in a row. At first, you could eat 5 at a time, and then you could eat 8 at a time. Not only did you refuse to pay, but you also brought people here to eat and drink for free, including Yuedong, Tang Shi, Song Xiai, and even Wang Xiaoyao. Later, I asked your father for money but he didn't want to pay. I almost fell out with him. Then you have to blame Brother Jiang. He said he was close to you and didn't need to pay. Wang Shengxiao laughed and looked at Di Jiang who was sitting opposite him, calm and quiet. The middle-aged boss slapped Di Jiang on the back. I haven't seen you for more than 2 years. Where have you been? Is my Rujiamo not delicious anymore, or are you tired of the old? You seem to have changed a lot. Are you pretending to be mature? Cough, cough, cough. Di Jiang was busy drinking mutton soup. There were a lot of chili in the soup, and it tasted ecstatic. The slap made Di Jiang choke and cough, and his delicious face turned red. The boss laughed and got up to fill a small bowl of clear soup. He condensed frost in his hand to cool the soup, and handed it to Di Jiang. Drink it quickly. Wang Shengxiao looked at this scene and smiled without saying a word. The boss here was surnamed Yuan, and his first name was Quan. He had been serving Mount Dibing in Beihai since his great-grandfather's generation. In the hearts of the Wang family of Beihai, he could be said to be a true descendant. Yuan Quan's grandfather had been the protector of the Patriarch of Beihai, and was also one of the 3 superiors of the invincible realm in that generation of the Wang family of Beihai. After he died of old age, his name was engraved on the stone of formidable person. Yuan Quan's father was one of the several people in charge of the Beihai Physics Laboratory in the previous generation. In Yuan Quan's generation, he used to be one of the top superiors of Mount Dibing. His strength had reached the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. His codename was Flying Ape. He was famous for his speed, and was also well known in the dark world. However, his foundation was seriously injured in a mission more than 10 years ago, and he barely retained the strength of the early stage of the ice-condensing realm. After Yuan Quan was injured, he stayed in Mount Dibing for a few years. He really couldn't stand the loneliness, so he simply brought his family to Shenzhou City and opened a breakfast shop. Now it could be regarded as the signature of the breakfast industry in Shenzhou. The detached villa left to him on Mount Dibing was still there, and now his son basically lived there. He had an excellent relationship with Wang Shengxiao and Di Jiang. Even though he left Mount Dibing, in Wang Tianzong's eyes, he was also a confidant. His son Yuan Shu graduated from Beihai Military Academy 6 years ago. He had joined the Beihai Corps while he was still in school, and was awarded the rank of second lieutenant. After graduation, he soared to the sky. In just 6 years, he was already a lieutenant colonel. After Wang Shengxiao became the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, the Beihai Corps recruited more than 300,000 soldiers in more than 2 years. Yuan Quan's son, Yuan Shu, was one of the main people in charge of this recruitment. It was self-evident what this meant. I just got out, and I haven't even had time to see the light of day again. You almost slapped me back again. Jiang rolled his eyes and took a big bite of the rujiamo. After more than 2 years in Beihai prison, he really wanted to have a bite of it for a long time. What do you mean by just got out? Did you commit a crime? Yuan Quan grinned. He didn't pay much attention to Mount Dibbing now. To cultivate my mind and body. Jiang smiled. His eyes were deep and satisfied. More than 2 years. I've gained a lot. Tut. Yuan Quan sighed with some regret. I thought you were caught and thrown into Beihai prison by the Nailan family, because you failed to rape the little girl of the Nailan family. The little girl of the Nailan family. Jiang's eyes dimmed slightly, realizing that he had said something he shouldn't have said. Yuan Quan coughed awkwardly, stood up and said, You eat first, I'll continue to cook. I'll add soup and meat. You eat slowly. Wang Shengxiao smiled bitterly. He looked at Jiang and didn't speak. Jiang drank the soup in silence. Compared with more than 2 years ago, he didn't seem to have changed much, but he did. More than 2 years ago, no matter how steady he was, he occasionally had the arrogance and high spirits of his youth. Double Thunder Veins entered the invincible realm at the age of 36, came from a wealthy family, was the chief student of Sword Emperor, and was handsome. Jiang did have the capital to be proud and arrogant. Today, 2 years later, he was nearly 40 years old. Some of the situation and spirit in those years had gradually disappeared with these 2 years of imprisonment. Now Jiang seemed to have completely settled down, and was as quiet as an ocean. Wang Xingxiao didn't know what to say. He stirred the mutton soup in front of him in silence. She went to Tiannan, didn't she? Jiang lowered his head and whispered, Did she come back? Wang Shengxiao shook his head with a bitter smile. With her character, although she went to Tiannan, there was basically no news about her. I guess she rarely left the lab. Beihai's silver eyes. Beihai's Nailan Shuring. When the genius woman with silver eyes was still in the Beihai lab, Jiang was one of the few people who could take her out of the lab. Jiang liked her. He had never denied it. Nailan Shuring, who was so focused and pure that she looked a little cold, never resented getting along with Jiang. But she just didn't resent it. The relationship between the two had been lukewarm for many years. Maybe they were friends. They were closer. Maybe in her heart, Jiang was her big brother. But that was all. Now that Nailan Shuring had gone to the Southern Heaven region, it meant that if there were no accidents, it would be very difficult for Emperor Jiang to see those enchanting silver eyes in the future. The faintly discernible connection between the two had been completely broken. Jiang ate the rujiamo and suddenly smiled. He asked, What are you going to do with me? What do you think, Brother Jiang? Wang Shengxiao wisely changed the topic with Jiang. More than 2 years ago, under the pressure of Wang Qinglei and Wang Xiaoyao, Jiang was finally not expelled from Beihai, but he was imprisoned in Beihai prison. The reason? Just because Li Tianlan said something to Jiang at that time. In fact, Li Tianlan just moved his mouth and didn't say anything. This seemingly ridiculous little trick caused great pressure to Jiang in the internal environment of the Wang family of Beihai at that time. It was because Jiang couldn't say what Li Tianlan said at that time. Someone in Beihai wanted to execute him, or be expelled from Beihai. Temporarily imprisoning him in Beihai prison was the best choice Wang Shengxiao could make under absolute pressure. The past 2 years were definitely not a waste for Jiang. He lived next door to Wang Tianzong. He could feel the sword intent of the Chosen One all the time. The sword intent condensed bit by bit, extremely detailed and clear from the initial chaos. This was equivalent to showing every detail of the 6 paths of reincarnation, sword of the Wang family of Beihai in front of Jiang. And what was shown was the essence of Wang Tianzong's swordsmanship. Jiang, before entering Beihai prison, used a saber. The two ideas of using a saber and a sword were completely integrated with him in more than 2 years. His realm, which had just entered the invincible realm, quickly stabilized, and then began to sprint toward the peak of the invincible realm. His martial arts were gradually changing and maturing. It was like a saber but not a saber, like a sword but not a sword. He was proficient in both saber and sword, plus his original double thunder veins. Now his incredible power and his own martial arts were enough to become the real pillar of the Wang family of Beihai. Who was his opponent before entering Beihai prison? The opponent he could compare with at that time was Saint, who entered the invincible realm at about the same time as him, and Dawn of Purgatory of Heaven Capital, who entered the invincible realm at about the same time as him. Now he ranked at the bottom of the divine list. However, the opponent in his heart right now was the Dark Queen Moon Gaze. It was Wang Xiaoyao, who had confirmed that he had entered the peak of the invincible realm. It was Li Shi, who had entered the peak of the invincible realm for more than 20 years. He was the so-called Heavenly Imperial Guardian, Gu Xingyun. Now Dijiang was indeed a little bit away from the real peak of the invincible realm. This gap could be said to be a lot, but it could also be said to be very small. It was so big that an ordinary invincible realm expert could never surpass it, and so small that his dual thunder veins could make up for it. In terms of strength alone, his strength had far surpassed that of the peak of the invincible realm. This was the trump card with which he was confident that he could fight against most of the experts today. How about I go to Tiannan? Dijiang asked with a smile. Tiannan can't hold on much longer, can it? He went to the southern heaven. Of course, there would be a place to stay. If Tiannan doesn't work, we can only abandon it. Wang Shengxiao shook his head. The situation over there is not optimistic. It's useless for you to go there. The currently Tianlan was completely different from 2 years ago. Brother Jiang, don't underestimate your enemy. There's a reason why he can climb to the top of the divine list. I fought with him not long ago, and I couldn't find any flaws in him at all. Wang Shengxiao paused and suddenly frowned. I even have a feeling that when he fought with me, he didn't use his strength at all. I don't mean that he didn't take it seriously, but his every move now seems not to consume any physical strength at all. How is that possible? Dijiang shook his head with a smile. Maybe it's an illusion. Wang Shengxiao smiled bitterly. But now it's certain that you are no match for him. Maybe you can approach him in strength, but you can't make up for the gap in other aspects. Even if we join hands, we can't. Who said that I will go to Tiannan to fight against Li Tianlan? Dijiang stood up and served himself another bowl of mutton soup. He didn't need to be polite with Yuan Quan, so he directly scooped a spoonful of mutton. If I don't fight against him, how can I see Nalan? Wang Shengxiao said blandly. And if you go to Tiannan, what identity will I give you? After second uncle left Mount Dibbing can't afford any trouble now. Now when you are officially needed, I'm alone and under a lot of pressure. All right. Dijiang thought for a moment, threw mutton oil chili garlic mashed into the soup, and said with a smile, how's the preparation for this election? Not bad. Wang Shengxiao bit the Rujiamo and said with some regret, I was going to enter the election with the help of the conflict between the academy and the new group, so that at least I can swallow some of the benefits of the Flourishing Age Fund. Tang Shi has also been preparing for this these days. But it's a little strange these days. The contradiction between the two sides seems to have eased, although it hasn't completely eased. So when are you going to enter the election? Dijiang asked. Wait for an opportunity. I can't afford to wait. Wang Shengxiao said in a deep voice. Since there is no opportunity, we can create a breakthrough ourselves and enter the election directly. Where? Dijiang said blandly. Huading. Wang Shengxiao's voice was firm. Dijiang suddenly raised his eyebrows. The Prince Group? Now the leader of Huating was one of the banners of the Prince Group. Attacking Huating naturally meant attacking the Prince Group. Wang Shengxiao sneered. How can it be so easy to take Wuyue away? If they dare to reach out, we will naturally fight back. If we can't protect Wuyue, we can use Huating to exchange. In this election, it is the core task to let Uncle Wen enter the cabinet, and taking Huating is the strategic goal. Only in this way can we not lose this election. Dijiang was silent. Now the biggest goal of the Wang family of Beihai and the Southeast Group was to not lose. It was impossible to win. The combination of Wang Qinglei and Wang Xiaoyao could not be said to be invincible in the world, but their sudden betrayal did stab the Southeast Group in the heart. It was a pretty good result to be able to stabilize the situation. As long as they could take Huating and promote Wen Siyuan to the top, the Southeast Group would not lose this election. In such a complicated situation, in many cases, as long as they did not lose, they would actually win. What's your specific plan? Di Jiang asked. I already have some information here. Wang Shengxiao smiled. It was provided by second uncle. If he wants to protect Huading now, he must pay the price. This information can make a lot of noise in Huading. Information? Di Jiang frowned tightly. Only involving the Prince Group? How is that possible? Wang Shengxiao shook his head gently. Huating has always been a mixed bag of good and bad people, and the situation is very chaotic. Once this thing breaks out, it will definitely be investigated. Under the strict investigation, the Giant Group, the North Group, and the academics can't escape. Di Jiang took a deep look at him. Just be prepared. The election is getting closer and closer, and the chaos is inevitable. But this time we are the ones to lead. Even if they want to settle accounts with us, they will probably have to wait until after the election. Wang Shengxiao's voice was gentle. Moreover, the focus is not only on Huating. I never believe that Li Tianlan will really behave. He looked at Di Jiang and raised the corner of his mouth with a strange smile. The information in my hand will be handed in a few days. When things break out, we will take the initiative to attack. Brother Jiang, you are the vanguard. I plan to let you go to Wuyue. What do you think? Chapter 1249. The moment the video was hung up, the picture on the screen paused for a moment and froze for less than a second. The image of Ji Wenjiang narrowing his eyes fell on the other end of the video. Meanwhile, on the screen, Ji Wenjiang also saw the smile of the graceful and majestic female chairman's lips curling upwards. This faint smile had a profound meaning, making it hard for others to decipher it. It was the confidence of victory, the mockery of disdain, and a trace of indifference as if everything was under control. Ji Wenjiang silently took the cigarette case, took out a cigarette, lit it and smoked it. In his office in the hidden Dragon Sea, his desk was still close to the window. There was a strong wind in Yuzhou. The howling cold wind blew against the window lattice and made a whining sound. Outside the window, the fallen leaves were falling with the wind, wantonly depicting the harsh winter in the hidden Dragon Sea. Ji Wenjiang's slightly narrowed eyes were deep, but behind the deep eyes, there was a touch of helplessness and bitterness, as well as anger that was not too obvious but really existed. Bai Qingqian. This Bai Qingqian, the only female speaker at the provincial level in the entire Zhongzhou state, had begun to become more and more tough recently. To some extent, Bai Qingqian was simply unscrupulous now. Everyone knew that she was now one of the leaders of the new group. But after all, the election had not officially begun, which meant that Bai Qingqian could be said to be a member of the new group, but also a member of the giant group. The ambiguity of her identity and position did not put her in a passive position. Given the relationship between Li Tianlan and Dongqing Wudi, ordinary strategies such as sowing discord were useless and would backfire. The relationship between the two remained unchanged, and the new group and the giant group were destined to advance and retreat together. It also meant that Bai Qingqian now had the full support of both the giant group and the new group. Bai Qingqian's strength was completely understandable, because now Bai Qingqian was very stable, unreasonably stable. After the election, there were 9 directors and more than 20 members of parliament. Anyone could have an accident, but Bai Qingqian was the most stable. After the election, Bai Qingqian properly entered the cabinet and ranked 3rd in the cabinet, second only to the 2 directors, the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister. Whether it was real power or influence, she would play an important role in the parliament. The new group was determined to win this position. Li Tianlan climbed to the top of the divine list at this time. Bai Qingqian's current position was almost uncontested except for herself. So now Bai Qingqian was in a state of having no desires at all. Bai Qingqian had criticized Hua Xingyang. A few days ago, after the giant group expressed its concern about the problems in Liaodong, Bai Qingqian criticized some problems in Tianfu province. The speaker of Liaodong criticized the Tianfu province, which was a hot topic in Zhongzhou state in recent days. Everyone could feel Bai Qingqian's confidence. But it was not over. Ji Wenjiang did not expect that he would be forced into a corner by Bai Qingqian. The Liaodong wandering case had fallen into a stalemate. Ji Wenjiang personally went to Liaodong, But the case suddenly became a stalemate, which was a great irony. After Ji Wenjiang arrived in Liaodong and had a talk with Bai Qingqian, the task force, which had been investigating smoothly in Liaodong, suddenly encountered great resistance. The complexity of the case began to change. Many clues that had been locked down either disappeared or became a trap to mislead the task force. It seemed that the closing of the case was far away. This made the task force have a little doubt about Ji Wenjiang, but it was just a doubt. No one had expressed it yet. Ji Wenjiang naturally would not stay in Liaodong for long. He stayed there for 3 days and talked with Bai Qingqian several times. But Bai Qingqian's voice was very clear. Stability, harmony, and unity. Ji Wenjiang could only fly back to Yuzhou. Soon as he came back, the person in charge of the task force began to call Ji Wenjiang to complain, saying that the task force was under unprecedented pressure in Liaodong. It was inevitable that there was some emotion and resentment in his words. No matter what the inside story was, at least the process was obvious. Before Ji Wenjiang went to Liaodong, the task force went smoothly. After Ji Wenjiang talked with Bai Qingqian, the task force began to hit a wall again and again. They were all experienced old inspectors. Naturally, they would not see anything from the surface, but the surface was also a clue. Although they did not suspect anything, at least they were now very curious about what Ji Wenjiang and Bai Qingqian had talked about. This curiosity was caught by Ji Wenjiang. Undoubtedly, Ji Wenjiang was a little annoyed and immediately had a video chat with Bai Qingqian. Bai Qingqian's attitude did not change at all. His attitude was extremely clear. He just wanted stability. Bai Qingqian very strongly expressed that she had the confidence to control Liaodong and hoped that the parliament would believe in her ability. He expressed full support for the work of the task force, but he also expressed that he did not want the task force to be used by people with ulterior motives. Bai Qingqian said that going to Liaodong was just an accident. The general situation in Liaodong was not as bad as she had imagined. She hoped that the parliament could trust Liaodong and the parliament of Liaodong. She hoped that in this sensitive period, the task force would respect the facts when investigating the case, and at the same time, they should know when to stop and not pester endlessly. The task force should be the task force of this case, not a group of fake inspectors with ulterior motives who wanted to see the world in chaos. If the previous words were said to be a strong chairman, then Bai Qingqian's last words were undoubtedly a naked mockery. Ji Wenjiang was so angry that he almost disregarded the consequences and directly talked to Bai Qingqian on the other side of the video chat. But in the end, he restrained his anger and barely found a way out. He said that he hoped that both sides would calm down and talk about it. Then he hung up the video chat. Bai Qingqian's attitude was completely beyond Ji Wenjiang's expectation. It was less than a week after the task force went to Liaodong, and he went to Liaodong. But in this week, Bai Qingqian's attitude was completely like that of a different person. What did this mean? This was not only Bai Qingqian's attitude. To some extent, this was the change of the new group and the academics. To be exact, it should be the change between Li Huaqing and Li Tianlan. Did Li Huaqing reveal his trump card? Ji Wenjiang shook his head subconsciously. If this was the situation caused by Li Huaqing revealing his trump card, it could only mean that the effect of this trump card was not very good. Everyone speculated that Li Huaqing had a trump card that could make Li Tianlan directly compromise. But in the current situation, the relationship between the two sides was only a temporary stalemate, far from a reconciliation. But if Li Huaqing did not reveal his trump card, then how on earth did it cause the current situation? The answer was actually very simple. Qin Weibai. According to the summary of intelligence from various aspects, the two forces of the academy and the new group went from tit-for-tat to a stalemate, all because Qin Weibai returned to Emperor Dong's palace. The first day she returned to Emperor Dong's palace was the first day Ji Wenjiang went to Liaodong, and it was also the first day Bai Qingqian's attitude changed. A cigarette burned out. Ji Wenjiang smiled bitterly and put out his cigarette in the ashtray. Qin Weibai. For the woman who once dominated the dark world, then dominated the Lin clan, and now began to dominate Emperor Dong's palace, Ji Wenjiang had nothing but fear in his heart. This was an opponent that could give anyone a headache. Moreover, although Zhongzhou state had cooperated with Samsara Palace before, It did not have much contact with Qin Weibai. He had caused a few big commotions, but each time, his methods were different, making it difficult for others to understand him. Facing an opponent that they clearly knew not to be underestimated, but did not understand at all, who would dare to act rashly? At the very least, he didn't dare to write an article. But now, with the change of Bai Qingqian's attitude, his position had become extremely awkward. The case in Liaodong had caught everyone's attention. Ever since it broke out, Ji Wenzhong had already received a lot of pleading calls. Some of them were old people who had retired from the academy, some were top vice ministers like Hua Zhengyang, and there were also representatives with real power from the academy. Because of Bai Qingqian's tough attitude, Ji Wenzhong could turn these people back, and he didn't even care about falling out with Hua Zhengyang. After all, Bai Qingqian was in charge of the supervisory department in any case. But now Bai Qingqian's attitude changed. Ji Wenzhong's situation suddenly became awkward. In recent days, he had been talking about the problem in Liaodong. With such a big problem in front of him, if he didn't say it, he would first lose his boldness as the Minister of Supervisory Department, or even dereliction of duty. When Bai Qingqian was strong, Ji Wenzhong's voice could only make the academy silent. But now Bai Qingqian changed her tone, and directly talked about stability. Suddenly, monstrous pressure directly pressed down on Ji Wenzhong. There were no eternal friends or eternal enemies. Hua Zhengyang's lack of vision did not mean that he was not broad-minded. Even if Bai Qingqian fell out with him before, as Bai Qingqian's tone changed, the contradiction between them suddenly faded. That was the current situation. It was Bai Qingqian who set off the storm in Liaodong. But when the storm was at its fiercest, Bai Qingqian suddenly stopped playing. Now it was Ji Wenzhong who was desperately investigating the problem in Liaodong. The problem in Liaodong had attracted a lot of attention. It was impossible for Ji Wenzhong to make peace even if he wanted to. He couldn't make peace either. The academics wanted to minimize the problem and handle it internally. Bai Qingqian demanded stability. Ji Wenzhong was desperately investigating Liaodong. What did that mean? No matter what the cause was, things had developed to this extent, which meant that Ji Wenzhong of the Southeast Group was fiercely firing at the academics and the Giant Group. No one could understand how great the pressure was if they were not the parties involved. Not to mention the process, but only the current result. Ji Wenzhong had been severely cheated by Bai Qingqian. There was no result in Liaodong, so Ji Wenzhong was trapped in Liaodong. The problem in Liaodong was obvious. Ji Wenzhong had no way out, so he had to investigate. But how could he investigate? Bai Qingqian came out in person to stop him. The task force was also in a very passive situation. They couldn't find anything. It was impossible not to investigate. If Ji Wenzhong forcibly withdrew at this time, not only would his prestige be ruined, but the entire Ministry of Supervision, and even the Southeast Group would be greatly affected. In the ever-changing situation, there were many intentional and unintentional collisions. In the game where only results mattered, Ji Wenzhong's current situation undoubtedly gave other groups a signal that they could plot against the Ministry of Supervision. The case in Liaodong was destined to be in a stalemate. But this was not a confrontation between the academy and the new group. It was a tacit understanding between the two sides, which was to make Ji Wenzhong temporarily unable to extricate himself from the matter in Liaodong. It was a game between the new group and the academy. The Southeast Group entered the game passively. In such a situation, what Ji Wenzhong feared most was something that was destined to happen. Huating. Chapter 1250. What would happen in Huating? Few people in Zhongzhou State knew about it now. To be exact, only Wang Xiaoyao and several high-level officials of the Southeast Group knew about the storm brewing in Huating at this time. But Ji Wenzhong had no doubt about the reaction speed of other groups. Once the incident in Huating broke out, everyone would react as soon as possible. Liaodong had now involved a lot of Ji Wenzhong's energy. What he was most afraid of was that the incident in Huating would be exposed at this point in time. But what he was afraid of happened. The chaotic war had begun. Wang Xiaorao held a bomb in his hand. He would inevitably detonate it at the most appropriate time to create the greatest benefits for him. This bomb was essentially a deal between Wang Xiaoyao and the Southeast Group. Both sides had reached a preliminary intention of cooperation, but it was up to Wang Xiaoyao to detonate the bomb. Ji Wenzong lit a cigarette again, picked up the phone, and planned to call Wang Xingxiao. Now he could not do much, but at least he had to inform Wang Xingxiao. Today's conversation with Bai Qingqian would probably spread throughout Zhongzhou State tomorrow. At that time, more pressure would be on him. In any case, he had to let Wang Xingxiao prepare in advance. The confidential phone just pressed 2 buttons. There was a sudden knock on the door. Ji Wenzhong's dialing hand paused slightly, and he looked at his watch. It was nearly 11 o'clock at night. At this time, if there was nothing special, the secretary would not knock on his door. "Come in." Ji Wenzhong put down the phone and said in a low voice. The secretary, who had been with him for nearly 5 years, opened the door and said in a steady voice, Minister Zhang said that he has something very important to report to you." Minister Zhang. There were many departments in the Ministry of Supervision, but at this time, only Zhang Xiaohua was qualified to stand outside his office in the Ministry of Supervision. After him and the first deputy minister, he was Wang Xiaoyao's absolute confidant. At this time, Ji Wenzhong's palm trembled slightly. He had already realized what had happened, but he could not avoid it. He could only nod and slowly said, "Let him in." The secretary nodded and left. Ji Wenzhong took a deep drag on the cigarette. It seemed that he inhaled too quickly and suddenly coughed violently. Zhang Xiaohua, who came over with a folder, was stunned. Before she said anything, Ji Wenzhong coughed and waved his hand, saying reluctantly, "Sit down." He picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. He smiled and said, "I'm old. My body can't take it anymore." "Minister, you are very busy every day. You should pay more attention to rest," Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. Ji Wenzhong smiled and didn't say much. He just asked, "What is it?" It was simple and direct, revealing a business-like attitude. Their relationship wasn't like this before. At the very least, it wasn't like this 2 years ago. It had been nearly 6 years since Zhang Xiaohua was transferred to Yuzhou from Huating. He was originally a rising star of the Southeast Group. When he came to Yuzhou from Huating, Ji Wenzhong was quite friendly to him. When Wang Xiaorao became a trusted subordinate, no one suspected Wang Xiaoyao. Naturally, no one suspected Zhang Xiaohua. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua's life in the Ministry of Supervision was smooth sailing. When he first came to the Ministry of Supervision, he was the deputy minister. Now he was still the deputy minister. It seemed like nothing had changed, but under Ji Wenzhong's guidance, his status in the ministry had skyrocketed. The difference was like heaven and earth. Now, Zhang Xiaohua could be said to be the 3rd most important person in the Ministry of Supervision. In such a top government office, Ji Wenzhong was a director, and the first deputy minister was a counselor. Zhang Xiaohua, the deputy minister at the level of governor, was now qualified to compete for the position of a counselor. This was inseparable from the support of the entire Southeast Group. But in the first year when the Southeast Group pushed him to this position, he betrayed the Southeast Group with Wang Xiaoyao. Sad? Disappointed? Angry? Maybe he had all these emotions. But Ji Wenzhong never expressed them. Zhang Xiaohua's position in the Ministry of Supervision had been completely stabilized. Ji Wenzhong was about to retire. Although he had his own standpoint, he was unwilling to really fight with Zhang Xiaohua. However, the relationship between the two quickly cooled down. Every time they met, they talked about business. After that, they did what they had to do. Zhang Xiaohua had long been accustomed to Ji Wenzhong's attitude. He bowed his head and sorted out the documents in the folder. Quietly, he showed his ferocious fangs to the old leader who had given him a lot of support. His face was heavy and serious. He said softly, "These are some documents from Huating's Ministry of Supervision. Minister, the problem is very serious. Huating is now secretly investigating, but they have encountered great resistance. Now they are asking us for help. It's here. It's officially here." Zhang Xiaohua's voice was very calm. But Ji Wenzhong clearly smelled the bloody storm behind this calm. He took a deep breath, took the documents handed over by Zhang Xiaohua very solemnly, and quickly browsed through them. Strictly speaking, there were 2 copies of this document. One of them reported that Qin Hui, the office director of Huading's parliament, had provided improper protection to many enterprises in Huading, and thus received huge benefits. Obviously, this document was very detailed, and it was reported by many people with real names. The investigation was also very in-depth. The information showed that Qin Hui had 5 mansions in Huading, 2 villas and 3 luxury apartments with an area of more than 500 square meters. Although his children were studying abroad, when they first came to Huading, they all drove luxury cars and lived a very luxurious life. In addition, Qin Hui also had a large number of shares in more than 20 companies in Huading, 2 of which were even listed companies. Of course, the name of the mansions, luxury cars, and shares were not written in Qin Hui's name, but the names of his relatives. The most outrageous was a company called Shenghua Real Estate. Its 3rd largest shareholder was named Qin Ming, who was only 15 years old this year, and was still in junior high school. Not to mention the shares of those companies. As the most prosperous international metropolis in Zhongzhou State, the housing price in Huading was completely expensive. Just the 5 mansions alone were worth more than 500 million Zhongzhou dollars. 500 million. In the entire Zhongzhou State, except for the governor and deputy governor of Beihai Province. How many people could take out 500 million in public? The office director of Huading's parliament. This sounded inconspicuous, but it was a real power. Qin Hui was a legitimate deputy governor, and also one of the 13 councillors of Huading. It could be said that he was the representative of Huading's speaker in Huading to the outside world, and the chief steward of the entire Huading. Comparing this position with this amount of money, it was a shocking impact. Ji Wenjiang glanced at the second document in a hurry. He didn't read the specific content of that document, but he saw the target of the report in the second document. Sun Qinggu. Well, if Qin Hui was the chief steward of Huading's speaker to the outside world, then Sun Qinggu was the chief steward of Huading's speaker to the inside world. He was the speaker's personal secretary. These 2 documents, these 2 knives, were completely aimed at the Prince Group. But what was this? Somewhat confused, Ji Wenjiang looked at Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua's face was calm and collected. Wang Xiaoyao stabbed the Prince Group in the back? No matter how the situation changed, now one thing was certain. The Prince Group had become Wang Qinglei's biggest reliance. At this time, Wang Xiaoyao stabbed the Prince Group in the back. What do you think? Ji Wenjiang suddenly asked while looking at the documents in silence. We still have to investigate it. Zhang Xiaohua said softly. Of course we have to investigate it. Ji Wenjiang forced a smile, and his face was a little pale. Tell me your specific thoughts. Things in Huading may be very complicated. What is said in the documents may not be all. Now is a critical period. It's better to find out the problems in Huading as soon as possible. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I know Chu Jiangqiao very well. He is capable enough, but sometimes he is too meticulous. He is good at stabilizing the situation, but in the face of complex cases, it is inevitable that he will waste some time. Minister, we don't have so much time to waste now, and Chu Jiangqiao has been in Huading for too long. It is inevitable that he will fall into various circles, and it will be difficult for him to exert his full strength. Zhang Xiaohua's voice paused, and she looked up at Ji Wenjiang. Ji Wenjiang nodded expressionlessly and said, Go on. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, So my suggestion is that at this time, Chu Jiangqiao should be transferred away from Huading. Jiangqiao is a talent. It is very good to put him in a stable environment and play a deterrent role. I think it is very good to let him go to Wuyue. As for Huading, we need to transfer a tough character who really dares to fight there. Minister, didn't you plan to let Lu Xiangyang go to Wuyue in the meeting a few days ago? It's completely unnecessary. I think it will be bad if Lu Xiangyang goes to Wuyue. Wuyue has been relatively stable in recent years. There may be some small problems, but we should believe in Speaker Qinglei's ability. At this time, I think it is the best choice to let Lu Xiangyang go to Huading. Zhang Xiaohua said slowly. Ji Wenzhong took a deep look at Zhang Xiaohua and instantly understood what she meant. Transfer Chu Jiangqiao out, and Lu Xiangyang there. On the surface, it was the Southeast group that was attacking the Prince group. Of course, this kind of cover-up seemed meaningless. Moreover, he was now involved in the Liaodong case, and the influence he could exert on Huading was relatively limited. Therefore, this case was really in the hands of Wang Xiaoyao. As for how to develop, Lu Xiangyang, who had just arrived, could not beat Wang Xiaorao. Only Wang Xiaorao had the final say, and Lu Xiangyang was just a shield pushed out by Wang Xiaoyao. Similarly, with this shield, Wang Xiaoyao could do a lot of things. Once the case in Huading broke out, Wang Xiaoyao, who held the case, would have the bargaining chip with all parties. At that time, not only Wang Xiaoyao, but also Wang Qinglei might occupy a great dominant position, and even have the possibility to get out of this mess. At this time, Wang Xiaoyao released the case in Huading, which was tantamount to single-handedly provoking the chaos that had already begun. Next, it should be time for all the big groups to show their abilities. Chapter 1251. While most people were caught off guard, Huading was in a state of turmoil. Liaodong was still in a stalemate. The Flourishing Age Fund was still in a stalemate. Although undercurrents were surging in Zhongzhou State, it looked calm on the surface. All the major groups seemed to be preparing or not. Therefore, when most people were watching silently, the sudden storm in Huading completely brought the undercurrents under the calm situation of Zhongzhou State directly to the surface. The Ministry of Supervision received real-name reports from many entrepreneurs in Huading, and a large number of people through special channels. They reported that Qin Hui, the director at the bottom of Huading, provided improper protection for many enterprises, participated in unfair competition, and received huge benefits. The real-name reports involving many people had always been investigated, and the list of whistleblowers included several influential entrepreneurs in Huading. The nature of the matter suddenly began to escalate. Ji Wenzhong specially held a plenary meeting of the Ministry of Supervision. As soon as the meeting ended, the special task force of the Ministry of Supervision was established. Zhang Xiaohua, the deputy minister, served as the leader of the task force and personally led the team to Huading to investigate Qin Hui's case. Huading was turbulent. The Ministry of Supervision was also turbulent. In the meeting of the Ministry of Supervision that lasted more than 5 hours, there were countless fierce confrontations, and the forces of all the major groups went all out. Zhang Xiaohua took the position of the task force leader without Ji Wenzhong's support. First, Ji Wenzhong was now trapped in the deep pit of Liaodong. Of course, he still had his own power, but the Liaodong case had not been solved perfectly. Ji Wenzhong himself was somewhat passive. Although he wanted to take the initiative in the Huading case, he had no power to do so. Second, the other major groups were competing too fiercely. The Southeast group had the advantage in a top government like the Ministry of Supervision, but it was absolutely impossible for it to turn this place into its own backyard. Even if it couldn't do it, it would be a taboo. Ji Wenzhong's existence could make the Southeast group have the power to overwhelm other groups in the Ministry of Supervision. But with Ji Wenzhong's failure this time, the Ministry of Supervision suddenly felt like 8 immortals crossing the sea. The Giant Group, the North Group, the Prince Group, the Academics, and the Southeast Group were all competing for the position of the task force. Since the Wang family of Beihai lost Huading more than a decade ago, it had always been the focus of all the major groups, but it had always been a place that no one could take. Therefore, Huading was a mixed bag of good and bad, and all the major groups had the power to infiltrate it. Today, the Prince Group had the upper hand in Huading. But with the outbreak of the case in Huading, the advantage of the Prince Group had been lost. In the current situation, whoever won the position of the task force would have the possibility to lead the storm in Huading. Who would be willing to let go of such an opportunity? Everyone was fighting for it, and neither side was willing to give way. So in the end, even though he didn't support Zhang Xiaohua, Ji Wenzhong still chose him. Zhang Xiaohua, Wang Xiaoyao, Wang Qinglei, and Yu Chuanguang were now close to the Prince Group, but they had not officially entered it. Moreover, they and the Southeast Group were also making use of and cooperating with each other. If Zhang Xiaohua went there, the Southeast Group would be able to control the affairs in Huading to a certain extent. At least in this matter, they had the possibility of being roped in. For the Prince Group, there was no doubt that Zhang Xiaohua was now close to them, and could be regarded as half of their own people. If they couldn't compete with their own people, it was the best choice to support Zhang Xiaohua. The Southeast Group and the Prince Group supported her at the same time. Zhang Xiaohua was also the former Minister of Supervision of Huading, so he knew Huading very well. Therefore, after a fierce competition, Zhang Xiaohua personally led the team to Huading. And Zhang Xiaohua did not disappoint anyone. Perhaps it was because the evidence in the report was too much and too detailed. On the third day of the task force's arrival in Huading, Qin Hui, the director of Huading, was directly taken away from the meeting of the directors of Huading by the task force. That afternoon, the secretary of Huading Speaker Zhong Yue was also taken away by the task force. The wind and clouds were howling. The major groups in Zhongzhou State were completely shocked. One after another, the people involved in the case were continuously dragged into it. Different from Liaodong, the whole of Huading had become a battlefield in the shortest time, and all the major groups entered the battlefield. And the first to move was the Southeast Group. The Ministry of Supervision operated at the top. Lu Xiangyang, Ji Wenzhang's confidant, was transferred to Huading as the director of Huading and the Minister of Supervision. And Chu Jiangqiao, the former Minister of Supervision, was transferred to Wuyue. Director Yu, the Minister of Supervision. On the third day of this heavyweight appointment, 2 deputy mayors of Huading were transferred to Wuyue. One served as the deputy governor, and the other as the director of the council office. An obscure network began to spread in all directions with Wuyue and Huading as the center, affecting everyone's mind. The new group did not directly participate in this matter, but all the influential forces were supporting the giant group. Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai were also paying attention to Huading. While many people were carefully analyzing the situation in Huading and thinking about how to make a move, Qin Weibai, who had received the news of the personnel transfer, just smiled and said softly, "Wang Xiaoyao is making arrangements. He benefits from both sides and exerts pressure on both sides at the same time. This is a beautiful move." "I don't understand," Li Tianlan said bluntly. Qin Weibai thought for a moment and said with a chuckle, "He should have a tacit understanding with Speaker Bai, or rather, he borrowed Speaker Bai's power. They have never met." But the problem in Liaodong put Ji Wenzhang in a passive position in the Ministry of Supervision. At this time, Wang Xiaoyao can take the initiative to the greatest extent by throwing out the Huading case. Benefits from both sides and puts pressure on both sides. Isn't Wang Xiaoyao afraid that the Prince Group and the Southeast Group will fall out with him? Not to that extent. Besides, they really don't dare to do so now. Qin Weibai smiled. The two sat on the big balcony on the top floor of Emperor Dong's palace castle in the early morning, enjoying the cold wind, leisurely and casual. This time, it is essentially a deal. The Southeast Group wants to touch Wang Qinglei, which can be said to be half true and half false. The so-called true is that they really want to touch him and settle accounts with him. But Wang Qinglei has been operating in Wuyue for so long, and the Southeast Group also knows that it is not easy to touch him. It is just a try. It would be best if they can touch him, but if they can't, they will put pressure on him. This year is very critical for Wang Qinglei. Even if the Southeast Group can't touch him, it will cause a lot of obstacles for him. So Wang Qinglei will definitely feel the pressure. He is in a bad situation now. If he has a choice, he naturally doesn't want to resist the Southeast Group by force. If possible, it is best to cooperate to a certain extent. So Wang Qinglei found Wang Xiaorao. Wang Xiaorao has a wide network of contacts in the Southeast Group. Now he has betrayed Mount Dibing, but he can talk to many people. Even if he can't make them change their positions, it is not difficult to meet them. Moreover, he and Yu Chuanguang have been operating in Huading for many years, and they have a lot of chips in their hands. Wang Xiaoyao should have prepared for such a situation many years ago. That's why he ran Huading and finally transferred Yu Chuanguang out of Huading. All of this was so that when he and Wang Qinglei plotted against Wuyue, they could have enough chips to face the Southeast Group. Is this the case? Li Tianlan asked. This case is not so simple. Qin Weibai said softly. If I am right, Zhong Yue is finished. No matter how the investigation is done, this case will eventually involve him, the Speaker of Huiting and a Member of Parliament. If there is no such certainty, the Southeast Group will not be moved by Wang Xiaoyao's chip. The current situation is very obvious. The Southeast Group is also seeking stability, but if they want to touch Wang Qinglei, they need to go all out, which is inconsistent with their demands. They put pressure on Wang Qinglei. Wang Xiaoyao gave them a chip that can pry Zhong Yue, a member of parliament, and the cooperation this time is successful. With this chip, the Southeast Group can plot against Huiting, which is no less important than Wu Yue. So they can accept letting go of Wu Yue and giving it to Wang Qinglei, because it is something they can no longer take back. It is better to let it go and fight for Huiting with all their strength. As for the Prince Group, although Zhong Yue has done a good job over the years, the major groups have put a lot of pressure on Huiting. Not to mention turning Huiting into the backyard of the Prince Group. Zhong Yue has had very few advantages in Huiting over the years. Huiting is no worse than Wu Yue. From another point of view, Wu Yue is no worse than Huiting. The senior management of the Prince Group is very eager to turn Wu Yue into their back garden, and it is relatively simple. As long as they pull Wang Qinglei into their camp, Wu Yue will belong to them. It is just that Wang Qinglei has a solid foundation and wants to go further. Now there are many people in the Prince Group who support Wang Qinglei, and there are also many people who oppose him. So he can only continue to look for Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Xiaoyao threw out the Huiting case at this time, and let Zhang Xiaohua take the lead. For the Prince Group, it is to show its value and also to put pressure on the Prince Group. After this incident broke out, the senior management of the Prince Group should soon unify the voices within the group and decide to support Wang Qinglei. In this way, they can not only stabilize Wang Xiaoyao, but also get Wu Yue. At the same time, they can use Zhang Xiaohua to leave some forces in Huiting. Even if the Southeast Group is dissatisfied with Wang Xiaoyao now, they can do nothing about it. They can't take down Wu Yue, so they naturally can't ask Wang Xiaoyao to give Huiting to them. What Wang Xiaoyao gave them was an opportunity that they couldn't miss. This opportunity is already in their hands, but Wang Xiaoyao must have more key evidence in his hands, and he will show it step by step. The Southeast Group will establish some advantages in Huiting in the face of more and more abundant evidence, which means that the Prince Group will continue to lose, which will also make the Prince Group more reluctant to give up Wu Yue. So both sides will meet some of Wang Xiaoyao's requirements. Even if they are dissatisfied with him, it will not affect their decisions. Wang Xiaoyao will transfer his team in Huiting to Wu Yue bit by bit, and the two groups will give him a certain degree of help. At the end of this game, Zhong Yue will be abandoned and become an abandoned pawn. The two groups will suffer heavy losses, but they will also gain a lot. The Prince Group will give up Huiting, which is difficult for them to control, and get Wu Yue. The Southeast Group will give up Wu Yue, which they can't get back at all, and get Huiting. Wang Xiaoyao and Wang Qinglei, who are sandwiched in the middle, can also get what they want. This is the balance. Both of them get something, and neither of them will win or lose. As for the other groups, they will not be willing to let the Crown Prince and the Southeast Group make such a deal. They all have their own designs on Huiting, so they will enter one after another. It is a chaotic battle, so the current situation in Huiting is very complicated. Li Tianlan listened carefully and thought about it for a long time. Then he said softly, "What's all this nonsense?" "This is wisdom," Qin Weibai said softly. "It is different from standing and fighting. The latter is to kill the enemy to the maximum extent to win, while the former, no matter how you fight, you will not be swayed by emotion. The premise of fighting is what you get and what you can keep. Standing and fighting has the nature of extinction. On this battlefield, the fighting is dazzling, but most of the time, it is actually seeking peace, stability, and balance. I know how to play. I'm an expert." Li Tianlan nodded and then shook his head. "I can't afford to play. I don't know how to play." He picked up the cup with a smile and took a sip. Looking at the calm lake in the distance, he asked, "What should we do next?" "Just wait patiently," Qin Weibai said softly. Now the major groups have just made their moves, and the situation is still chaotic. We can't get Huading, and the giant group can't get it either. The giant group can't get it either. They can only get some partial benefits, so it's best to wait and see now. The matter in Liaodong is still involved, and others will not think that we did not enter the battlefield, so there is no possibility of them joining forces against us. When the situation in Huading becomes clearer, we can know what to do. Qin Weibai's red lips gently bit the straw in the cup. But the outcome of Huading, if analyzed in depth, will probably be the outcome of this election. Huading will also be the focus of this election. Huading was the focus of this election. Such a script had actually happened once more than a decade ago. It was also in Huading that time. Before the election, the Southeast Group lost Wuyu. This was the heaviest loss suffered by the Southeast Group after the collapse of the Li family. And this time it was in Huading again. Qin Weibai's eyes turned, and no one knew what she was thinking. We still have to wait. Li Tianlan shook his head, feeling a little helpless. He was really bored now. Don't worry. Qin Weibai chuckled. Huading is already in chaos. All the major groups have begun to enter the battlefield, and each other's energy is involved. Such a situation is good for us. Li Huaqing should also make up his mind. In 3 days at most, he will definitely take the initiative to talk to you. Why are you so sure? Li Tianlan was a little curious. Because something will happen in Yuzhou. Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan and said softly. Her eyes were full of affection, but behind the affection, there was a touch of sadness. Tianlan, after Li Huaqing talks to you, I will leave. Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai calmly and raised his eyebrows. Where are you going? Qin Weibai turned her head and whispered. To the Lin clan, to deal with some things. After all, I am still the patriarch of the Lin clan. Chapter 1252. Li Tianlan's eyes became a little complicated. His mood at this moment could not be described at all. Qin Weibai was going to the Lin clan. Without any warning, Qin Weibai said it calmly. Li Tianlan didn't feel surprised at all. The emotion in his heart seemed to be reluctance, but also disbelief. Everything was a little uncertain. What happened to the Lin clan recently? Li Tianlan asked. There has always been something. It just depends on what I do. Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan softly, as if she was trying to remember his appearance. Now the dark world is not calm, and there are some different voices within the Lin clan. Mr. Lin is now in South America. The branch in South America wants to expand. The interests of the Jiang family, the Heroes Club, and even the fantasy world are what they want now. Li Tianlan nodded. Lin Bujing. A few days ago, he talked to the patriarch of the largest branch of the Lin clan in South America on the phone. He was a very forthright middle-aged man. The deepest impression he gave Li Tianlan was that he was extremely decisive and sincere. Lin Bujing hoped to get the support of Emperor Dong's palace in America. Strictly speaking, he hoped that Emperor Dong's palace could send troops to America and share America with him. This guy was very ambitious, but he didn't fight at all when he should. He handed over some core information, and even core industries of the Jiang family to Li Tianlan without hesitation. Lin Bujing made it very clear on the phone that he would fully support Emperor Dong's palace's expansion in America. America was now in chaos. After Jiang Qiansong's death, the new invincible realm expert Jiang Guochu had stabilized the situation. But on the night of the final battle in Beihai, Jiang Guochu died on Mount Dibing. Several secret bases of the Jiang family suffered heavy losses under the joint efforts of the Lin clan, the fantasy world, and the Heroes Club. The whole Jiang family was on the verge of collapse. But it was just on the verge of collapse. A lean camel was bigger than a horse. The Jiang family of South America had been operating in America for hundreds of years. Although it had suffered heavy losses, its resistance was still strong. Lin Bujing was very thoughtful. According to the current situation, it was only a matter of time before he took down the Jiang family. However, he had no intention of taking the Jiang family's interests. He would unconditionally give this part of the interests to Emperor Dong in exchange for the opportunity to form an alliance with Emperor Dong. Lin Bujing's real target was the Heroes Club and Fantasy World, which were nominally on the same front with the Lin clan. The Heroes Club was also a superpower in South America. Its overall strength was slightly weaker than that of the Jiang family, but not by much. Compared with the Jiang family's extensive involvement, the Heroes Club was relatively singular. Many of the areas they developed overlapped with Lin Bujing's, so it was convenient to annex them. If they took over the Heroes Club, Lin Bujing's strength would skyrocket in the shortest time. If they took over the fantasy world, it meant that Emperor Dong's palace and the Lin clan had the ticket to enter North America. The two sides would cooperate. Lin Bujing would provide manpower, resources, and intelligence, while Emperor Dong's palace would provide high-end combat power and benefits to deter the Dark World. The two sides equally divided everything of the Jiang family of South America and the Heroes Club. Then they would join forces and march into North America. Swift and decisive. Li Tianlan couldn't refuse the conditions put forward by Lin Bujing. So a few days ago, the three top assassins Cool Breeze, Drifting Cloud and Deep Dream had taken a group of elites of Emperor Dong's palace to meet with Lin Bujing. Li Shi was also ready to fly directly from Emperor Dong's palace to South America. Three top assassins with comprehensive combat power that was no less than that of a half-step invincible realm expert, and there was an expert at the peak of the invincible realm behind them. Such a lineup was enough to satisfy Lin Bujing. Now it's not just Lin Bujing. Qin Weibai said softly, there are many branches of the Lin clan. Their operating mode has always been like this. The headquarters will not interfere with the decisions of the branches, but the branches must cooperate with the headquarters to a certain extent. The Lin clan is a family, but it can also be said to be an alliance of many families. When the major branches obey the headquarters to a certain extent, they will also provide enormous financial support to the headquarters, allowing the headquarters to produce more branches. The headquarters will also provide the major branches with a top combat force to deter the major branches, as well as coordinate the major branches to advance and retreat together at critical times. The Lin clan seems to be relatively scattered, but it can always guarantee the core interest chain. Their comprehensive strength may be slightly inferior to that of Beihai, but it is more stable. For hundreds of years, there has never been any internal conflict in the Lin clan, because there is no conflict of interest within them at all. No ambitious guy will be interested in the headquarters that stands aloof from the world. They all take the money and go out to spread their own branches. Now Lin Bujing is making a big move in South America, and the other branches are naturally not willing to lag behind. The strongest of the major branches, the European branch, has decided to expand. In addition to these mainstay branches, many small branches also have their own interests. Qin Weibai's eyes flickered. Obviously, she had begun to think about the situation of the Lin clan. After the chaos in Snow Country, there is the final battle in Beihai. The two great chaos changed an era. Now the Dark World is empty, and countless forces are leaderless. The Wang family of Beihai is busy stabilizing itself, and the Lin clan naturally wants a share of this situation. Lin Bujing cooperates with you, and Lin Yuxian is also here. That is to say, two major branches of the Lin clan have a cooperative relationship with you. She looked at Li Tianlan and whispered, "Do you know what I'm worried about now?" The European branch? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. "I hope they can take the initiative to cooperate with you. The strength of the European branch is extremely strong. With their help, our expansion in Europe will be smoother. But what I'm most worried about is that they won't cooperate with you. This means that they are very ambitious, and in the process of expansion, they are likely to hurt the interests of Emperor Dong's palace. Do they have the guts?" Li Tianlan asked faintly. "I'm the patriarch of the Lin clan, and I'm also your woman. Mr. Lin has a very good relationship with you. All this means that you have a deep relationship with the Lin clan." Qin Weibai smiled and said, "There is no shortage of smart people in this world. Those people in the European branch may not dare to take the initiative to attack Emperor Dong's palace, but if they don't cooperate with us, they may think that you won't turn against them with the help of the Lin clan, and let you suffer some losses." Li Tianlan frowned and shook his head. "I really won't, it's just," he narrowed his eyes and didn't go on. It was okay for the European branch to take advantage of him and the Lin clan. But once this precedent was set, no one knew what would happen in the future. I'll take care of it. Qin Weibai smiled and stared deeply at Li Tianlan's face. She said softly, I'll talk to them. If it doesn't work out, I have a countermeasure. At that time, we can announce our breakup. This is equivalent to temporarily cutting off the relationship between the Lin clan and Emperor Dong's palace, and they won't dare to mess around. Announce their breakup? Breakup. Li Tianlan's arms suddenly shook, and he looked up at Qin Weibai quietly. Qin Weibai was also looking at him. Her smile remained the same, but it was somewhat complicated. It's fake. Qin Weibai said softly, when Emperor Dong's palace gains a foothold in Europe, we can get back together at any time. Li Tianlan looked at her quietly. The distance between them was very close, but in fact, it seemed that the distance between them had quietly widened in this morning. Li Tianlan said with a poker face, Is this your way of dealing with it? This sounded like a helpless solution, and it could indeed make the Lin clan's European branch have a lot of scruples when they insisted on doing things their own way. But who was Qin Weibai? Li Tianlan never doubted Qin Weibai's means. The whole dark world would not doubt it. As long as Qin Weibai wanted to, she had plenty of ways to persuade the Lin clan's European branch. There was no need to pretend to break up, which seemed to be a helpless move. In other words, if things really came to this point, then their breakup was not a helpless move. Then what was it? Are you angry? Qin Weibai said cautiously, If you don't like this method, you can change it. Li Tianlan was a little upset. He looked at Qin Weibai, bowed his head, and drank some water without saying anything. Qin Weibai also fell silent. Once again, there was a touch of awkwardness between them that had never existed before. Li Tianlan frowned slightly, and his eyes were a little dazed. Since they came back from the lake that day, Li Tianlan had always felt that something was wrong. But Li Tianlan couldn't tell what was wrong with him. The Qin Weibai in front of him was Qin Weibai. Li Tianlan could be sure of this. But this Qin Weibai, for some reason, always had some conflicts with the Qin Weibai in his heart. But in fact, there was no difference between them. Li Tianlan doted on her, loved her, and even relied on her. But when he was with her, this kind of feeling always created a barrier between him and Qin Weibai. This kind of feeling seemed to have always existed, but Li Tianlan didn't notice it at all. It was like, this kind of feeling, which should have been natural, was always a little inappropriate for Qin Weibai. Or in other words, it should not be on her. All his feelings should be on another person. But the Qin Weibai in front of him was indeed Qin Weibai. During the days when they were together, no one knew what the other was thinking. Qin Weibai proposed to leave Emperor Dong's palace, and even pretended to break up. This made Li Tianlan more and more confused. He didn't know what was going on with these actions, but it always gave Li Tianlan a very bad feeling. Tianlan. Qin Weibai suddenly called out. Li Tianlan looked at her. It's time to talk to Li Guangtu. Qin Weibai lowered her head and whispered. You haven't talked to him since you caught him, have you? You've been ignoring him. Now it's almost time. Li Huaqing will come to you soon. How to deal with Li Guangtu should be decided. Li Tianlan nodded thoughtfully and suddenly said, What do you suggest? Qin Weibai smiled softly and said, This is the internal affairs of the Li family. I don't know, so you can only make the decision. After a pause, she seemed to hesitate and continued, But I don't like this person. I'll let him go for the time being. Personally, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Li Tianlan took a deep look at her. Both of them knew what it meant to let Li Guangtu go at this time. It didn't mean that Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace would have one more enemy in the future. It meant that as long as Li Guangtu was let go, Li Guangtu would definitely go against Li Tianlan. It also meant Li Guangtu would die. This was Qin Weibai's attitude. Chapter 1253. For everyone in the purgatory of heaven capital, the so-called cage was in their own headquarters. They could see the sun rising and setting, the blue sky and white clouds, know the changes in the outside world, and feel the wind and clouds, but they were trapped in a small space, unable to do anything but rage. No one could have imagined that their own headquarters would become a prison to trap themselves. In this prison they were free. They could choose to eat, have all kinds of entertainment, and pay attention to the outside world. But they just couldn't leave the headquarters. Their ambitions, their dreams, their expectations of what to do, what to change, what to get, they could only think about it. They couldn't do anything. Such a ridiculous and fantastical thing had actually happened just like that. The headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital became a prison. Li Guangtu, the dominator of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, was captured by Li Tianlan. The Purgatory of Heaven capital, which still had the foundation of a superpower, and seemed to be elite and powerful, lost its right to speak in the dark world in an incredible way. The people in the Purgatory of Heaven capital began to panic and wonder. It started before the final battle in Beihai. Until now, it had been more than 2 months. Some people entered the Purgatory of Heaven capital, but no one came out. The atmosphere in the headquarters became more and more weird. All kinds of quarrels and contradictions began to escalate, and the cohesion that they were proud of began to gradually disperse. All of this was because the headquarters had now become a prison that only allowed people to go in and not get out. The headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was not besieged by thousands of troops and horses, not locked by various high-tech weapons, and not forbearance under the general trend. It was a streak of sword energy. It was just a streak of sword energy. It came from the young Donghuang. For dozens of days, the streak of sword energy had been surrounding the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, never dissipating, never weakening. It was fierce and light, sealing every expert who wanted to leave the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Apart from Li Guangtu, the only invincible realm expert in the Purgatory of Heaven capital, Daybreak, had stabilized his realm. These days he had been trying to break the blockade. Daybreak admitted that he was no match for Li Tianlan, but he always felt that he could not even defeat a streak of sword energy. But it turned out that he really couldn't. The first time he entered the domain of sword energy, Daybreak struggled to walk 4 steps in it, and then he was seriously injured. 2 months later, he recovered from his serious injuries and once again faced the sword chi cage. However, he only managed to take 4 steps inside before he was heavily injured again. From the beginning to the present, the sword energy showed no sign of weakening. It was endless. Fire-flaming realm martial artists would die if they touched it. The peak of the thunder-shocking realm martial artists could struggle for a while. As for Daybreak, as an invincible realm martial artist, he only had 4 steps to move. Daybreak was very sure that with his current strength, 4 steps was his limit. The moment he took the 5th step, he would perish in the sword chi. The climate of the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was warm and sunny. The sword energy floated invisibly outside the headquarters, occasionally reflecting a colorful light under the sun. But the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was getting more and more depressed. It was a state of gradually losing hope and becoming numb. Everyone's hearts seemed to be falling along with the trend of the fall, constantly degenerating under the general trend. Daybreak stood quietly in front of the gate of the headquarters, looking at the same sunshine inside and outside the headquarters with a blank look. After Li Tianlan's sword energy blocked the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, it became the place where Daybreak stayed most often. The sword energy began to spread to the entire headquarters from this place, like a cage, completely enveloping the headquarters. After that, Li Tianlan never came to the Purgatory of Heaven capital again. But the sword energy he left had never dissipated. What Daybreak had been studying was this sword chi. This sword strike, not to mention its power, was undoubtedly the peak of the dark world. If he could study it thoroughly, his realm could definitely directly rush to the peak of the invincible realm. And the embarrassing situation of the Purgatory of Heaven capital would completely disappear. So day and night, eating and sleeping, most of the time he was here. He was also here during the period of 2 tests and 2 serious injuries. More than 2 months. The invisible sword energy that ordinary people couldn't see at all had become clear in his eyes. The sword energy was like a dragon, constantly rotating around the headquarters. Wisps of sword energy continued to gather and overlap, but they did not disappear. Instead, They formed an extremely delicate cycle. Daybreak could see this sword energy, but he could only see it. He didn't gain anything from this sword energy. What he could feel was the purity of this sword energy. It was extremely pure. The sword light was restrained, and there was even no sword intent. Maybe there was. But Daybreak couldn't see it at all. What was in front of him was just a pure sword energy that he couldn't see through at all. Daybreak just watched it silently. Time passed. Day after day. His mentality was still stable, but as time went by, his heart inevitably changed a little. It was uncertainty and confusion about the future. After Li Guangtu was taken into Emperor Dong's palace, there was no more news. Daybreak didn't know how Li Guangtu was. The uneasiness and restlessness of the entire purgatory of Heaven Capital became more and more intense because of this news. He didn't know if Li Guangtu could walk out of Emperor Dong's palace, or if they could walk out of the purgatory of Heaven Capital. He didn't know when the pure sword energy in front of him would disappear. Maybe it would disappear one day. But how long would that be? 1 year, 2 years, or even longer? If the overall situation of Zhongzhou State and the Dark World was settled, what was the point of them going out? Could they really go out? When everything was settled, maybe this sword light would become a real killing sword. Once the constantly circling sword energy shrank inward, no one in the entire purgatory of Heaven Capital could stop it. It shrank in all directions from the ground to thousands of meters in the air. All the people in the purgatory of Heaven Capital, all the buildings, all the flowers and plants, and even every grain of dust, would be completely shattered by this sword energy. There would be no trace of their existence. In the blink of an eye, everything would be gone. Under this sword energy, under such a prospect, Daybreak really didn't know what to do. Bewilderment and powerlessness repeatedly attacked his heart, almost breaking his reason. Light footsteps sounded from behind him. The confusion in Daybreak's eyes quickly disappeared, and he slowly turned around. Don walked over slowly with a lunchbox in his hand. He also held a bottle of Wuliangye in his hand. "Do you want to drink some?" Don asked. "Forget it." Daybreak took the lunchbox and shook his head. "I'm not in the mood." In the lunchbox, there was steamed rice with fragrant grains, 6 dishes, and 1 cold dish. There were 3 meat dishes and 2 vegetables which smelled and looked good. The amount was enough. Daybreak ate silently with the dishes in his hand. The rice tastes different this time. The top-grade fragrant rice next door. Dawn paused and said self-deprecatingly. It was sent by Emperor Dong's palace. The corner of Daybreak's mouth twitched. The next door naturally referred to the neighboring country. Its top-grade fragrant rice was world-famous. The price was not expensive for the purgatory of Heaven Capital, but it was several times that of ordinary rice. Even if the purgatory of Heaven Capital was not short of money, it would not be so extravagant in this regard. It was estimated that only Emperor Dong's palace, which had too much money to spend, could do such a thing. Although they were trapped here, their daily meals were actually good. They couldn't go out, but they could enter. There would always be some people outside the purgatory of Heaven Capital, and their existence was enough to ensure logistics. Li Tianlan didn't know whether he didn't know or he didn't think much about it. On the 3rd day after he left the purgatory of Heaven Capital, a group of logistics teams came to Emperor Dong's palace. They were well prepared with all kinds of daily necessities, toothbrushes, toothpaste, rice, shower gel, and shampoo. And all of them were the best brands. The rice now was sent by Emperor Dong's palace. "What's this?" Daybreak smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Yeah, what's this?" Don murmured to himself. He had heard these words from many people. Li Tianlan blocked the purgatory of Heaven Capital, and his attitude was clear but unclear. At least until now, Li Tianlan might fight with Li Guangtu to the death, but he really didn't regard the purgatory of Heaven Capital as an enemy. There were too many veterans who were loyal to the Li family here, and too many elites who were in a dilemma between Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu. The 2 generations of heirs of the Li family might be hostile, but between Emperor Dong's palace and the purgatory of Heaven Capital, there was bound to be endless and chaotic fetters. Li Tianlan locked them up, but he never killed anyone from the purgatory of Heaven Capital. He couldn't kill them because they were not enemies. He trapped them because he didn't want them to become enemies of Emperor Dong's palace. The batches of logistics supplies and food sent by Emperor Dong's palace all represented Li Tianlan's sincerity. How did the people of the Purgatory of Heaven capital feel when they ate the rice sent by Emperor Dong's palace and received the daily necessities sent by Emperor Dong's palace? Top fragrant rice that could be exchanged for dozens of caddies of ordinary rice, toothpaste and toothbrushes imported from abroad, a large number of Zhongzhou State's top cigarettes and wine, Zhonghua Suyan, Maotai, and Wuliangya, were moved over, and even the towels and bath towels were King Hermes. What was this? Was it taunting, showing off, or swaggering? None of them. Every veteran of the Li family knew it was none of them. It was not taunting them for making a wrong choice or showing off that Emperor Dong's palace was as rich as a country. Everyone, including Dawn and Daybreak, knew it. None of them. This was the promise of that child. The child that many of them knew. The child that many of them had watched grow up. The child who used to live in a shabby camp on the border of Zhongzhou State. The child who had no enough to eat, no tobacco, no wine, no vegetables, and was miserable but always wanted to make the Li family rise again. He said that he would let the people of the Li family live the best life. They were from the Li family. There were people from the Li family in the Purgatory of Heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace. These large batches of almost ostentatious and extravagant materials entered the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. They were all Li Tianlan's promises. They stood on Li Guangtu's side. Some of them were no longer Li Tianlan's elders or friends, nor were they Li Tianlan's enemies. But in Li Tianlan's eyes, they were all from the Li family. It was not indecisiveness or anything else. As long as they were from the Li family, in Li Tianlan's heart, they deserved to be forgiven. Daybreak and Dawn both fell silent. The two squatted at the gate of the Purgatory of Heaven capital and finished the food in front of them in silence. Dawn packed up his things, sat on the ground without a care for his image, and handed Daybreak a special supply Zhongzhou State cigarette. Do you want to try the cigar? It's the top product in America. I tried it. It's not bad, but I'm not used to it. Dawn asked. Daybreak shook his head, lit the cigarette, and gave a wry smile. Now we're a little messy internally. Dawn whispered. Hua Zhang has been very angry recently. Yesterday he almost fought with Tong Ming. Just now when I got the food, I talked back to him, and we parted on bad terms. When he spoke, his voice was very calm, but there was a touch of melancholy in his eyes that couldn't be concealed. In terms of blood relationship, Li Huazhang was Li Guangtu's cousin. Li Tianlan had been calling him uncle since he was a child. About 10 years ago, he went to East Island to join the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Compared with some veterans, Li Huazhang was one of the few surviving members of the Li family after the collapse. He was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and was now the backbone of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. However, Li Huazhang and Li Guangtu didn't have a good relationship. He had been supporting Li Tianlan before. Although he was here, he was thinking about Emperor Dong's palace. Recently, Li Huazhang had been getting angrier and angrier, and he even directly fought with people some time ago. It's not just Huazhang who is getting angrier and angrier, right? Daybreak smiled. The corner of Dawn's mouth moved. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought, and finally kept silent. Of course, it was not just Li Huazhang. There were many. They used to fight side by side with them, laugh and scold, and they could block knives for each other, and even die for each other. Now there was a sense that they couldn't make plans with each other if they had different goals. There were many people in the Purgatory of Heaven capital who supported Li Tianlan. Daybreak, Dawn, and Li Guangtu knew this, but there was no way to solve it. The relationship between the Purgatory of Heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace was complicated. It was impossible to make it clear. These people stayed in the Purgatory of Heaven capital now. Some wanted to fight for it, and didn't want the Li family to split. Some wanted to draw more people to Li Tianlan's side. Some were in a dilemma and didn't want Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu to turn against each other. There were many reasons. After Li Tianlan appeared in the Purgatory of Heaven capital and blocked it, these people were the calmest and even the happiest. But during this time, these people were also the angriest. Not just them. Dawn and Daybreak could clearly feel that even some people who had been close to them, and even stood in Li Kuangtu's camp now had subtle changes in their attitudes. They gradually alienated them, and became more and more indifferent to them. Why? Because of the outside world. The people here couldn't go out, but the news from the outside world could come in. When the news that Jiang Shangyu, Gu Xingyun, and Li Kuangtu joined hands to besiege Li Tianlan came, the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was in an uproar. If Daybreak hadn't suppressed it, the Purgatory of Heaven capital might have been divided that day. Li Kuangtu. Because of Li Kuangtu, the Li family had completely declined. That was Gu Xingyun's conspiracy and the desperate counterattack of the Wang family of Beihai. No one blamed him. Gu Xingyun. It was him who made the Li family what it was now. How many people in the Li family hated Gu Xingyun? But now Li Kuangtu and Gu Xingyun actually joined hands to deal with the heir decided by Li Honghe. How absurd it was. Where did such a joint effort put the old people of the Li family? Where did such a joint effort put the old people of the Li family who had suffered over the years? Where did such a joint effort put the old people's hatred who had died over the years? Did such a joint effort mean that after the blockade of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was lifted, they would stand together with Gu Xingyun to deal with Li Tianlan? Li Huazhang, who was usually gentle and calm, scolded Li Kuangtu and Daybreak on the spot. He scolded them for being Gu Xingyun's lackeys. This angered some people, but it made more people in Li Kuangtu's camp unable to even raise their heads. The internal conflict that was about to break out was suppressed by Daybreak with the power of the invincible realm. But since that day, Daybreak could clearly feel that the people of the Purgatory of Heaven capital had become cold. That night, 3 experts of the Li family who had left the Li family's camp earlier, and had chosen to support Li Kuangtu for many years found Daybreak. They came straight to the point and said that after the blockade of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was lifted, they would join Emperor Dong's palace. This was not a betrayal. The cooperation between Li Kuangtu and Gu Xingyun meant that he gave up the support of the old people of the Li family. Since they gave up, it was natural for them to leave. Li Tianlan still regarded the Purgatory of Heaven capital as a part of the Li family. They also thought of themselves as members of the Li family. This position had been set many years ago. Now the Li family asked the people of the Li family to stand with Gu Xingyun to deal with their own people. They couldn't accept it, and they couldn't do it. This was a betrayal. Big brother, this is really wrong. Daybreak was silent for a long time, and then he said in a low voice, when the final battle in Beihai broke out, the Purgatory of Heaven capital had made a detailed battle plan. At that time, their main goal was to recapture East Island. But no matter how that plan developed, it could not involve the matter of joining hands with Gu Xingyun. No one expected that Li Kuangtu would go with Gu Xingyun. He abandoned the obsession that the Li family had held for many years. In a sense, this was a betrayal. This kind of betrayal also made him lose the support of the people. Now we can't see Big Brother, and no one knows what's going on. I don't believe that Big Brother doesn't understand the disadvantages of joining hands with Gu Xingyun. Daybreak said softly, I can understand how Huazhang feels, but at least we should give Big Brother a chance to explain. Maybe it's because of the benefits, maybe it's because of the prospects, or maybe it's because Emperor Dong's palace is giving you too much pressure. Li Ming said in detail. Jiang Shangyu should be the key. Otherwise, with Big Brother's temperament, he would not join hands with Gu Xingyun, and Gu Xingyun would not join hands with us. Jiang Shangyu is the key. Jiang Shangyu. Li Ming shook his head abruptly and sat on the ground with a gloomy face, not saying anything. Regarding this matter, you also have your own thoughts, right? Daybreak glanced at him and laughed. Dissatisfied. Yes. Dawn was silent for a while, then nodded. Do you hate me? Daybreak continued asking. Dawn nodded, then shook his head. I hate Gu Xingyun. Then what do you think of this? Daybreak asked, looking into Dawn's eyes. Li Ming was in a trance. After a long time he lit a cigarette, took a deep breath and said softly, I won't join hands with Gu Xingyun, but I will support my elder brother. That's a good sentence. He didn't let down the Li family or his position. But, do you still have a chance to support him? A calm and indifferent voice sounded abruptly. The sword energy around the purgatory of heaven capital fluctuated slightly for a moment, and then the sword energy that covered the sky shook violently. Li Tianlan's figure appeared directly in the air. He looked down at daybreak and dawn, his eyes calm and condescending. The entire purgatory of heaven capital was completely alarmed in an instant. In the purgatory of heaven capital, experts walked out of their rooms one after another and quickly gathered toward the gate. Everyone looked at Li Tianlan with extremely complicated eyes. The eyes of daybreak and dawn were more complicated. Especially daybreak. He couldn't help but think of the first time he met Li Tianlan in East Island. At that time, if he hadn't taken action, would the current situation be different? But how could he not have taken action? Daybreak looked at him silently. After a long time he said hoarsely, "What did you do to His Highness?" Li Tianlan glanced at him, then at the crowd gradually gathering in the purgatory of heaven capital, and said blandly, "I killed him." Daybreak's body shook violently, and his face completely changed. "What did you say?" "Li Kuangtu is dead," Li Tianlan said blandly. Chapter 1254. After the bolt from the blue, there was an indescribable silence. Behind daybreak and dawn, at the forefront of the crowd, the beautiful phoenix suddenly shook her body. She seemed to be in disbelief and raised her head. She stared blankly at Li Tianlan standing in the air. Everyone's expression was dead silent. Li Kuangtu, who had been able to suppress the Wang family of Beihai many years ago. Li Kuangtu, whose scheming and personal strength had caused uneasiness in the entire Zhongzhou state. Li Kuangtu, who made everyone believe that he would lead the Li family to the peak. Li Kuangtu, who was teamed up by Kunlun City, the Wang family of Beihai, and even united with foreign forces and labeled as a traitor. Li Kuangtu, who grew up in the Li family, fought side by side with them, went crazy, laughed and quarreled with them. Li Kuangtu, who cooperated with Gu Xingyun. Was he dead? Indescribable complex emotions swept through everyone's heart like a tsunami. One after another, streaks of blood spread in Daybreak's eyes at a speed visible to the naked eye. His eyes instantly turned red. Li Tianlan looked at him silently with a calm expression. No sadness or joy. "I don't believe it." Daybreak gritted his teeth, stared at Li Tianlan, and growled word by word. The commotion in the crowd finally began to spread. People regained their ability to think, and the noise and uproar spread wildly. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said calmly, "The body is still on the way and will be sent here later. How about the funeral? You can do whatever you want." "I don't believe you dare to kill him." Daybreak met Li Tianlan's gaze and did not give in at all. There was only madness left in his eyes. "It's just a sword strike. Why don't I dare to kill him? Why can't I kill him?" Li Tianlan said lightly. His voice was flat without any ups and downs, with supercilious casualness, carelessness and naturalness. Daybreak stood where he was and his aura kept surging. It was difficult for most people to understand the relationship between Daybreak and Li Kuangtu. He and Dawn were brothers, but they were not brothers. They were two little beggars picked up by Li Kuangtu from outside. Their life views, martial arts strength, character, and attitude were all formed by following Li Kuangtu. They certainly had a strong sense of belonging to the Li family, but this sense of belonging was not as important as Li Kuangtu himself in their hearts. In their hearts, Li Kuangtu was like a father, a teacher, and a big brother. During the heyday of the Li family, the two little beggars picked up by Li Kuangtu were trained as sacred guards of Li Kuangtu. In the war of treason at the border, the two of them followed a large number of elites of the Li family to face the first wave of attacks from various superpowers. After being seriously injured, they barely broke through and planned to join Li Kuangtu, but Li Kuangtu had already moved the battlefield with several invincible realm experts. They were lucky to survive, lurked in East Island after the border war, and became the first two cornerstones of the purgatory of heaven capital. Then they continued to follow Li Kuangtu and built the current purgatory of heaven capital. 42 years old this year. Except for the first few years when Li Kuangtu didn't bring them back to the Li family, he and Daybreak had been with Li Kuangtu all their lives and had never left. Li Guangtu was at the forefront of the battle. Li Guangtu was at the back to develop his forces. Whether he showed up or not, Daybreak and Li Ming knew that Li Guangtu was still there. As long as he was there, the two little beggars he picked up dared to face all challenges. Time went by year after year. The image of Li Guangtu kept changing in their hearts, from father and brother to teacher, and gradually became the pillar of their hearts, heaven and earth, the world and their faith. They were the top generals of the Li family. But first of all, they were still Li Guangtu's confidants for most of their lives. On that rainy day in Yuzhou that year, the two hungry little beggars took shelter from the rain under the eaves of an exquisite restaurant. They looked enviously and longingly at the food in front of the restaurant's customers, swallowing saliva and shivering. Li Guangtu was still the same Li Guangtu. He was the chosen one of the Li family, the hope of the rise of the Li family, the gloomy and vicious young master of the Li family, the first commander of the Border Control Corps of Zhongzhou State, the invincible realm expert of the Li family, the traitor, the god of the purgatory of heaven capital, and the loser who was defeated by Li Tianlan, and even had to cooperate with Gu Xingyun. What did it matter? In their hearts, Li Guangtu was still the big brother who walked out of the restaurant on that rainy day, touched their heads, smiled, and said that he would take them to eat delicious food. That year, Li Guangtu was 19 years old. They were only 6 or 7 years old. That year, the handsome Li Guangtu was having dinner with his classmates in that restaurant. The two little beggars changed into clean clothes, followed him from the restaurant to the bar, and then to the hotel. When Li Guangtu walked into the hotel room with the two little girls who could be regarded as campus belles in his school, the young master of the Li family said to them with a smile, "You'll follow me from now on." Many years later, Daybreak and Dawn knew that when they first met, Li Guangtu was compassionate. Guangtu did have a compassionate heart, but if it weren't for the poor and kind-hearted young lady that day, Li Guangtu wouldn't have done that. The two little beggars became props that day. It was because of Li Guangtu's kindness to them that the beautiful young lady willingly took off her clothes in front of Li Guangtu with another female classmate in the hotel that night. But what did it matter? They might be props, but they were not abandoned in the end. After that night, they were taken by Li Guangtu to the Li family's unbelievably luxurious mansion in Yuzhou. They had new identities, new rooms, and new books. Li Guangtu said that they were his younger brothers. Everyone in the Li family was extremely friendly to them. No one dared to look down on them at school, because they had a brother who often drove a luxury car with all kinds of beautiful girls to and from school. They were no longer props, as if they had really become Li Guangtu's younger brothers. Later on, they were all masks. At that time, Li Guangtu was the real Li Guangtu. He was merciless in training, merciless, charming, surrounded by all kinds of beautiful girls, and had a lot of money in his pocket. He would buy a lot of snacks for them. He would laugh when he took them to eat spicy hot pot. He would be at a loss when he cried. He would be merciless in training. He would take all the responsibility when he got into trouble and yell at others. He would let Daybreak and Dawn step on his shoulders to watch a strange big sister take a bath. He would play glass ball with them for an afternoon without any impatience. He would play video games with them until late at night, and then drive out for skewers. He would force them to get drunk and lift the skirt of the girl at the next table. Things changed. Different people had different Li Guangtu in their hearts. He might feel sorry for everyone, but he really didn't feel sorry for the two little beggars. And now, Li Guangtu was dead. The world seemed to have ushered in the end. The pillar of faith had completely collapsed. It was just a sword. Why wouldn't he dare? His words were simple, and his tone was calm. There seemed to be a slight sound in the dark. "I killed him. Li Guangtu is dead. The body is still on the way. It will be sent here later. How about the funeral? You can do whatever you want." It was just a sword. Why wouldn't I dare to kill him? Why couldn't I kill him? The clear and distant voice kept echoing in Daybreak's ears. At first it was broken notes, but as the notes kept combining, Daybreak finally understood what those words meant. His reason was broken little by little in the subtle sound. His soul was twisted and completely collapsed in an irreversible trend. "No." A shrill voice sounded from behind. Phoenix, who was staggering, suddenly screamed and a mouthful of blood sprayed directly from his mouth. Daybreak suddenly looked up. His eyes were already blood-red. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. Without any hesitation or thinking, the sharp and twisted sword light gathered in an instant. Daybreak's figure suddenly rose into the sky, like a meteor. "I'll kill you." At the same time as the ferocious roar sounded, the soft sword that had been with him for decades had been pulled out. The swaying blade tightened for a second, and then completely collapsed. The shining sword light spread wildly in the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Blood bloomed in the air. He no longer had any concerns or thoughts. Daybreak, who was completely mad, directly burned his vitality at this moment. The sharp sword energy was condensed to the extreme, and turned into a giant sword shadow of hundreds of meters. The shadow of the giant sword completely enveloped Li Tianlan. As Daybreak's body rose into the air, the shadow was constantly shrinking. The sword energy was still condensing. The giant sword shadow, which crossed from top to bottom, shrank into countless sword energy long swords. Sharp, gloomy, and pure. Daybreak's eyes were full of madness. Before this sword hurt anyone, he had been seriously injured because of his reckless outburst. The sword shadow and Daybreak rushed over at the same time. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. He raised his palm and pressed it down. It was calm, casual, and light as if it had no power. However, everyone could hear the oppressive and violent sound that suddenly rang out in the air. The sky above the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was abruptly twisted for a moment. In the thunderous sonic boom, all the sword energy disappeared in an instant. The whole space was shaking violently. The twisted air was shaking wildly in a way visible to the naked eye, and ripple-like ripples appeared in the air. Daybreak's rising body seemed to be hit by a huge force, and was directly slapped down at a faster and fiercer speed. Boom! The ground shook violently. The asphalt pavement in front of the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital suddenly cracked. Dust flew, and the dense cracks spread in all directions on the ground, all the way to the front of the crowd. Daybreak's whole body was slapped into the ground, covered in blood. He coughed violently. Li Tianlan. Dawn's attack and roar followed Daybreak. The weapon in his hand was also a soft sword. The soft blade trembled slightly, and blue electric arcs lit up one after another. Li Tianlan glanced at him. He stood in the air, and didn't even move. The sword energy around him directly pressed down. There was another pit beside Daybreak. The ground made a slight sound in the process of cracking. The two brothers, Daybreak and Daybreak, were lying side by side. In the blink of an eye, the two strongest experts of the Purgatory of Heaven capital were both seriously injured. Li Tianlan landed on the ground. Wu Qing stayed in Emperor Dong's palace. Naturally, he didn't wear the black windbreaker that could be worn even in summer. Dressed in beige casual clothes, he clapped his hands casually, without any dust on his body. He did it casually, as if it were nothing. The entire Purgatory of Heaven capital was dead silent. If the almost extravagant supply of materials in the past 2 months made some people in the Purgatory of Heaven capital understand something, and made others have other ideas, then Li Tianlan's casual action was enough to make them really realize what the number one on the divine list of this era was. Li Tianlan's eyes quickly scanned the crowd. There were many people in the crowd that he was familiar with. Some people he knew. Some people he only had some impressions of. Similarly, there were many people he had never seen before. The elites of the Li family formed the main body of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. But the Purgatory of Heaven capital was also developing, so there would naturally be new blood joining. These people didn't have the entanglement in the hearts of the old people of the Li family. Their loyalty was only to the Purgatory of Heaven capital, not to the Li family. When Daybreak and Dawn were slapped down from the air, some of these people subconsciously took a step forward. Among them were some veterans of the Li family, and more of them were new blood who joined the Purgatory of Heaven capital later. Some people's eyes flickered, and they stood still. No one knew what they were thinking. The people who were most familiar with Li Tianlan all had complicated expressions. They wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. This was a different attitude. To some extent, this also represented the different positions within the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Li Tianlan suddenly smiled and took 2 steps forward. He looked at a middle-aged man standing in front of the crowd and whispered, "Uncle, long time no see." This was an old man who looked a little weathered, a little weak, and a little old, but still handsome. He stood quietly in the first row of the crowd, surrounded by a dozen middle-aged men and women. Obviously, in the purgatory of heaven capital, this was a man whose status was not too high, but he had considerable influence in the Li family. When Li Tianlan was looking at him, he was also looking at Li Tianlan. Different emotions were surging in his deep eyes. There was relief, nostalgia, trance, anger, helplessness, joy, confusion, and bitterness. Li Huazhang, Li Guangtu's cousin. This was a real member of the Li family. Even in the most glorious time of the Li family, he was one of the core members of the Li family who was valued by Li Honghe. If Li Tianlan had to rank all the people in the purgatory of heaven capital, excluding Li Guangtu, Li Huazhang's importance was definitely in the top 3. Li Huazhang's strength at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm could not be said to be a top expert, but he was the talent that Emperor Dong's palace currently lacked the most. "Tianlan, what do you want to do here?" Looking at his nephew, whom he had not seen for more than a decade, Li Huazhang moved the corner of his mouth and asked in a hoarse voice. His tone was a little difficult, and he was in a trance. The year he left the Li family's camp, Li Tianlan was only in his early teens. At that time, like most people in the Li family, he was overwhelmed by the cruel reality. He was not close to Li Tianlan, nor was he estranged. In that oppressive environment at that time, it was really difficult for anyone to calm down and get along with a child carefreely. Li Huazhang only remembered that when Li Tianlan was a child, he liked to stick to him and ask him to tell stories. At that time, Li Tianlan was even younger, about 5 or 6 years old. 2 years before he left the Li family's camp, Li Tianlan had begun to seriously accept Li Honghe's almost cruel training plan and worked hard to change the Li family's fate. They didn't even have the chance to meet at that time. In any case, Li Huazhang did not expect that the first meeting between uncle and nephew after leaving the Li family's camp would be like this. He killed Li Guangtu? Li Guangtu was dead? Li Huazhang looked at him in a daze, and his eyes were a little dull. "I came to see you," Li Tianlan said slowly. His eyes narrowed slightly. "I also came to see the child." "Child?" Li Huazhang was stunned. The crowd was silent for a moment, and everyone's expression suddenly changed. Li Tianlan gently raised the corner of his mouth and turned to look at Phoenix, who was standing there in a daze. His voice was soft. "Where is the child?" "You and Li Guangtu's child." Chapter 1255. That child, that child. In the headquarters of the purgatory of heaven capital, uneasiness, hesitation, struggle, and different emotions permeated the crowd. Everything that happened today was too sudden. Everyone in the purgatory of heaven capital was not mentally prepared. They all thought that the problem between the purgatory of heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace was only between Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu. Both of them were from the Li family. Even if there was a difference in strength, they should not be in such a hurry to kill each other. Li Tianlan's youth became his greatest advantage against the purgatory of heaven capital. He still had too much time to put the already divided Li family back together and make the Li family better, so people thought that he would not use too drastic means. Li Tianlan's sword qi blocked the purgatory of heaven capital, but did not kill anyone. The subsequent supply of materials confirmed this point. They thought that Li Tianlan would be gentle to the purgatory of heaven capital, slowly draw it to his side, and try to incorporate the purgatory of heaven capital into Emperor Dong's palace. But today, when no one was mentally prepared, Li Tianlan came to the purgatory of heaven capital again. Conciliatory? Roping him in? Convince? No. Nothing at all. He directly announced the death of Li Guangtu, which instantly hurt Daybreak and Dawn. He didn't have much contact with the old people of the Li family, and directly asked about the child of Li Guangtu and Phoenix. Li Guangtu had descendants. This was no longer a secret. This child was undoubtedly very special in the hearts of the old people in the purgatory of heaven capital. Those loyal to Li Guangtu would regard this child as the young master of the purgatory of heaven capital. Those who came from the Li family and stood on Li Guangtu's side regarded this child as the future young master of the Li family. For those old people who were in purgatory of heaven capital but had their hearts in Li Tianlan, they had mixed feelings about this child. Now hearing the news of Li Guangtu's death, and seeing Li Tianlan come directly to ask about the child, almost everyone thought of a word. Cut the weeds and pull up the roots. Many people could no longer remain silent. Li Huazhang was the first to speak. He said in a deep voice, Tianlan, Huawu is Guangtu's flesh and blood. For Li Huazhang, it was another matter whether he recognized the child as the young master or not. But no matter what, the child was indeed the blood of the Li family. This identity alone was worthy of his protection. Li Tianlan was speechless for a while and asked, "What's the child's name?" Huawu Li Huawu Li Huazhang, Li Huachxing, Li Huawu this name. Is there really no one who would call it wrong? Regardless of whether someone yelled out the wrong number or not, someone would definitely call the wrong number, right? Right? He takes after his mother. Li Huazhang said in a low voice, Jiang Huawu. Li Tianlan glanced at Phoenix. For the first time, he learned Phoenix's surname. He nodded and said softly, "Where is he?" Li Huazhang raised his head and looked straight into Li Tianlan's eyes. He said calmly, "This is the bloodline of the Li family. Tianlan, are you really going to? I'm just looking." Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and smiled. "Uncle, do you think I shouldn't see it? Your Highness, may I know in what capacity does your Majesty have come to see young master?" A chubby middle-aged man stepped forward and smiled amiably, but his eyes were sharp. "Are you Emperor Donghuang of Emperor Dong's palace? Or a member of the Li family?" Li Tianlan was silent for a second and said faintly, "I don't understand. Who can translate it for me?" Beside the fat man, a woman who looked to be in her early 30s came out and said softly, "If your Majesty comes to visit young master as a member of the Li family, we naturally welcome you. But if you come as Emperor Donghuang, you are the enemy of the purgatory of heaven capital. Although the purgatory of heaven capital is not strong, before we fall, we will certainly have the courage to stand in front of your Majesty. Your Majesty, why don't you have a try?" "Got it," Li Tianlan said with a smile. "Are you forcing me to take a stand? Young master? What young master?" "Of course, it's the young master of the Li family," the fat man said with a smile, his voice clear and firm. Li Tianlan looked at the fat man quietly. Everyone's eyes were also focused on the fat man. There were always some people whose loyalty was not as strong as Daybreak's performance, but they were equally fearless. "I am the patriarch of the Li family, and I have never appointed a young master. Explain. How did this so-called young master of the Li family come about?" Li Tianlan looked at the fat man's eyes aggressively. The fat man's face changed, and he said in a deep voice, "His Highness Li Guangtu is the only son of Senior Li, and Huawu is the legitimate son of His Highness. Naturally, he is the only heir of the Li family. Your Majesty, am I wrong?" Li Tianlan looked at him quietly, and his voice did not fluctuate at all. "Li Guangtu is indeed Grandpa's son, but when Grandpa died, he was not the designated heir." "Of course I know." The fat man's voice sounded very respectful. "His Highness has never been greedy for the position of patriarch of the Li family. What he wants to control is the purgatory of heaven capital. Before Senior Li died, your Majesty did temporarily take charge of the Li family, but the Li family belongs to the Li family. Huawu is now the last lineal descendant of the Li family. If the Li family is not handed over to him, who else can it be handed over to? If Senior Li knew Huawu's birth, he would definitely make the same choice." The purgatory of heaven capital and Emperor Donghuang's palace. How can the people of the Li family be convinced if they don't hand over such a big foundation to Huawu? If they don't hand over such a big foundation to Huawu, will they always let outsiders take charge? Everyone looked at the fat man in shock. Li Huazhang's face changed. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought, but he did not know what to say. Li Tianlan seemed to be angry and laughed. So you mean that this child named Huawu will not only inherit the purgatory of heaven capital in the future, but I will also hand over Emperor Donghuang's palace to him, right? Is that what you mean? That's not what I mean. The fat man said softly. It's that the Li family really needs a reasonable and legal heir. And Huawu is now the only candidate. I believe that Senior Li's spirit in heaven will also agree to let Huawu take charge of the purgatory of heaven capital and Emperor Donghuang's palace. Your Majesty's contribution to the Li family is undeniable, and we are also grateful for your contribution to the Li family. We also hope that Your Majesty can make persistent efforts and train Huawu well in the future, so that he can completely take over Emperor Donghuang's palace and purgatory of heaven capital. Well, this was not only asking him to hand over all his current family property, but also to do his best to train the person who robbed him of his family property. Li Tianlan suddenly did not know what to say. Glib talk had never been his strength. Ridiculous. In the gloomy low roar, Li Huazhang, who had been silent, could not bear it anymore and stood up. Zuoqing, if you don't know the situation of the Li family, don't talk casually. Emperor Donghuang's palace is the foundation of his integration of various resources. Why should Huawu take over? The situation he created can't be taken away with a few words. Moreover, why do you say that Huawu will take over Emperor Donghuang's palace? Tianlan is the heir of the Li family appointed by Senior Li on his deathbed, not the temporary control of the Li family. Emperor Donghuang's palace, the Li family, and the purgatory of heaven capital should be his. Even if the Li family has a young master, it should be Tianlan's confirmed candidate. Li Huazhang stared coldly at the fat man who was called Zuoqing, and his voice became colder. Moreover, Zuoqing, you are just a guest of purgatory of heaven capital. You are not a guest of the Li family. When is it your turn to intervene in our affairs? That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.